Law enforcement. A 2020 Gallup poll suggested that confidence in the police had fallen to a record low, with fewer than half of Americans expressing faith in law enforcement. While widespread news coverage of the killing of George Floyd and other instances of apparent police misconduct definitely contributed to this decline, relatively low trust in police is persistent and may be tied to dishonesty amongst the ranks. Throughout history, anecdotal rumors, claims, and even documented examples of law enforcement officers lying and otherwise behaving dishonestly have appeared regularly. There have even been many systemic examinations of police dishonesty in large cities in the United States. For instance, in 1994, the New York City Mayor, David Dinkins, appointed the City of New York Commission to investigate allegations of police corruption and the anti-corruption procedures of the police department, commonly known as the Mullen Commission, to investigate the nature and extent of police misconduct. The commission concluded that a culture of lax attitudes toward corruption had led to pervasive corruption, criminality, and lawlessness among the officers of the NYPD. Deception and a blind eye to rule violations had shaped the department into a den of lies. A widespread tolerance of lies to protect their own was also documented in police departments in Chicago, Los Angeles, and other major cities. Police were viewed by many citizens as big liars. But not all lying by the police is illegal. In fact, many of the big liars in police departments are fully supported by the legal system, and the lies themselves are endorsed as legitimate practices. In 1969, the U.S. Supreme Court heard the case of Frazier v. Cupp. Martin Frazier had been drinking at a bar with his cousin. Police later found that another patron of the bar had been murdered. The police picked up Frazier and his cousin and separated them for questioning. The investigators lied to Frazier, falsely telling him that his cousin had already confessed and implicated Frazier in the murder. Frazier denied the accusation, but ultimately confessed to the murder. At trial, Frazier's attorneys argued that the deception by the police should invalidate any confession that Frazier later offered. The Supreme Court ruled otherwise, finding that the deception by the police did not render the confession inadmissible. Since then, courts have seen this case as an affirmation of the legality of interrogation tactics that involve outright lying by the police. In various cases, police officers have elicited confessions by lying to suspects about the evidence against them. For instance, officers have falsely claimed that a dead suspect is still alive, that fingerprints linked the suspect to the crime, that satellite imagery showed the suspect committing the crime, and that DNA evidence was undeniable. While these deceptive techniques may help police gain confessions from guilty suspects, they also increase the odds that innocent people will falsely confess to crimes. The Reid technique is one of the most widely used police interrogation techniques in the United States. It was developed in the 1950s by John Reid, a psychologist who had been a Chicago police officer. The technique is used to generate an emotional roller coaster for the suspect in an interrogation. In turn, the interrogators apply extreme pressure to confess by convincing the suspect that there is no escape, and then shifting to an empathic, helpful, and understanding stance to create an alliance with the suspect. The Reid technique proposes several deceptive strategies, including demonstrating false empathy for the suspect's plight, falsely telling the suspect the criminal act seems morally justified, and falsely offering a reason or rationale that would explain why it might have been reasonable to commit the crime. One criticism of the Reid technique is that it leads to false confessions. Principally, the suspects feel so utterly convinced that they have no way out of their predicament that they falsely confess to the crime in hope of receiving a more lenient sentence. In Germany and England, where such lying by police is not standard practice, law enforcement officials are able to maintain high rates of confessions and also have low rates of false confessions. These findings call into question the validity of claims that dishonesty is necessary for police to protect the public effectively. Some courts in the United States are beginning to view deceptive tactics by police interrogators as overly coercive. For instance, in Illinois, an appellate court overturned the murder conviction of an 18-year-old. In that case, police interrogators deceptively told the suspect that they had incontrovertible evidence that he had fired the gun. They convinced the suspect that in the face of such undeniable evidence, things would go much easier for him if he confessed to the shooting. He offered a confession and was convicted. The appeals court subsequently determined that the suspect falsely confessed to the crime, largely because he believed the lies his interrogators had fabricated. In 2021, Illinois passed a law barring investigators from lying to minors during questioning, although they are still allowed to lie to adult suspects. In several other states, politicians have introduced bills that would dramatically limit the use of deception in interrogations. Liars in the pulpit. Andy Traub described the case of the pastor at his church. He found his pastor funny, engaging, and sincere. But he was a big liar, too. A few keen members of the congregation noticed that the preacher's sermons were similar to sermons given by other preachers. They did some deep research and came to an unsettling conclusion. Their pastor had stolen almost every single word of every sermon he had delivered for the past 5 years. He stole the titles, the artwork, his interpretations, his jokes, his stories about his childhood, and so on. Everything he said in every sermon was stolen from others and presented as if it were his own. This man at the altar was a big liar. It turns out that some big liars seem motivated by pure laziness. Other big liars in the pulpit lie for financial gain. The prominent televangelist Jim Bakker served years in prison after being convicted of numerous counts of fraud and conspiracy. He lied to his followers, telling them that the money they donated would be used to help needy people overseas. He lied to others, telling them that their contributions were invested in a hotel. In reality, he used the funds to support a lavish lifestyle and to pay off a woman who he allegedly drugged and raped. Other prominent men of the cloth also turned to big lies to conceal bad behavior, such as sexual escapades. Ted Haggard was an evangelical preacher who headed a 14,000-member congregation. He preached against homosexuality, but later was accused of a same-sex affair and the use of illicit drugs. He denied all the accusations to his followers. Eventually, a voicemail revealed him asking his male lover to secure him some methamphetamine. He continued to lie for a while, before finally coming clean to his flock. Still others lie simply to create an impressive story about themselves. Pennsylvania pastor Jim Moats spent years convincing his flock that he had served as a Navy SEAL in Vietnam. He would impress his parishioners with stories of harrowing military escapades. He seemed to borrow storylines from Hollywood movies, including being assigned to kitchen dishwashing duty because of his bad attitude from the movie Under Siege with Steven Seagal, or the time he was waterboarded as part of his interrogation resistance training from the movie G.I. Jane with Demi Moore. He would walk around town wearing the golden trident emblem of the real Navy SEALs. He bought it at a surplus store. His lies were eventually uncovered by a real Navy SEAL, and Moats admitted to being a big liar. Other widely covered instances of institutional big liars in the Catholic Church revolved around widespread instances of child sexual abuse. In 2019, Cardinal Theodore McCarrick was found guilty of sexual harassment and sexual abuse of minors and adults. He was subsequently dismissed from the Catholic priesthood. Numerous accusations had been made against McCarrick, but he had dismissed them all. He was regarded by some experts as a pathological liar. As revolting and disconcerting as McCarrick's misdeeds were, there is compelling evidence that church leaders conspired to lie and cover up his crimes. Doctors lying. People in the helping professions are less likely to be judged as big liars. Nursing tends to be consistently rated as the most honest and ethical profession by the public, even though some nurses lie. Physicians and psychologists tend to fall into the same boat of lying to patients, but their occupations are generally not thought of as lying professions. These helping professions may be regarded as honest specifically because these professionals are helping others, even if at the cost of lying. In one study, more than half of the doctors surveyed admitted to sometimes describing a patient's prognosis more optimistically than the facts would support. They also indicated that they would conceal financial relationships they had with drug providers and would conceal instances of malpractice. Overall, though, most doctors reported being quite honest most of the time. About 90% indicated that they had been honest with all patients during the preceding year. In 2014, the Mental Health Foundation convened a large panel of professionals, researchers, caregivers, and other experts to explore the topic of lying to people with dementia. After an extensive 18-month survey, analysis, and exploration, the panel concluded that many caregivers, professionals, and staff who work with dementia patients regularly use lies and other forms of deception to support the well-being of their patients. The panel concluded that it would be best to move away from never-lie philosophies and instead consider using untruth interactions that would minimize distress in their patients. They argued that a kind and compassionate effort to help patients make sense of their own reality was ultimately what was most important, rather than having caregivers impose the truth on patients. That is, they endorsed compassionate dishonesty. Ryan argued that as doctors in our culture take on a paternalistic role, leading patients through waters with which they may be largely unfamiliar, they don't usually lie. Instead, they exercise an economy with the truth in their cautious attempts to protect their patients from the pain of deeply unpleasant truths. Rather than doling out the brutal facts of the situation, doctors often conspire with the patients to find the best version of the truth, one that conveys the closest approximation of the truth that the patient can tolerate. Through this shared construction of reality, doctors and patients co-author palatable narratives of pain, survival, and death. These positive spins need not, and often do not, necessarily entail outright lying. After all, you have a great chance of pulling through is simply a matter of optimistic perspective when describing someone who has a 90% chance of dying soon. Some doctors are big liars out of a sense of kindness, warmth, and compassion. However, not all physicians are benevolent deceivers. Dr. Farid Fatah was an oncologist who owned one of the largest oncology practices in the state of Michigan. Several years after he opened his practice, other medical staff began to express concern about his treatment of patients. Fatah appeared to be using cancer treatments that were overly aggressive and maybe unnecessary. When authorities looked into some of Fatah's medical practices, they found no evidence of wrongdoing. As years went by, more and more patients and colleagues worried that Fatah was using non-standard approaches to treating patients and occasionally misdiagnosing patients. At one point, Fatah was out of the country, and one of his newly diagnosed cancer patients broke her leg. She was treated by one of Fatah's colleagues. That physician was shocked when he reviewed the patient's blood work. She had no sign at all of having cancer. Suspicious, the doctor began reviewing the charts of many other patients of Fatah. What he discovered was alarming. Fatah was diagnosing patients with cancer when there was no indication they were ill. He was then placing them on expensive chemotherapy treatments that they did not need, sometimes for years. The FBI finally stepped in, quickly determining that Fatah was lying to patients about their diagnoses and fraudulently billing them and their insurance companies for the treatments. One of the patients, Robert Zobirai, discussed the harm he had endured. The doctor had concocted a false diagnosis for Zobirai, telling him that he had a rare type of blood cancer that would require extensive and expensive chemotherapy and radiation treatments. Those treatments took their toll. Zobirai's body twitched uncontrollably, and his teeth fell out. He eventually learned that his suffering was all the result of big lies. A final tally showed that Fatah had lied to at least 553 people, convincing them they had cancer and needed treatment. He had defrauded patients and insurance companies of at least $34 million. He admitted that his lies were all told out of pure greed. While some doctors may be big liars, others have taken lying one step further. Isa Oskiraz's parents wanted their daughter to study medicine and be a doctor. They were overjoyed when Isa announced that she had scored very well on the medical entrance exams and had been admitted to medical school. Eventually, she graduated and was working as a general practitioner at a state hospital. She found she was interested in surgery, so she began to work with a doctor in the pediatric surgery unit. She conducted examinations and was even allowed to participate in surgeries, stitching up patients at the end of their surgical procedures. But alas, Isa Oskiraz was not a doctor at all. When she failed to pass her medical school entrance exams, she pretended to go to medical school anyway. She lived in dorms and hung out with medical students, but she never stepped foot in a medical school classroom. She forged her diploma and lied about her qualifications. She was an entire fraud. After she was arrested for her lies, she admitted that she had done it all because she didn't want to let her family down. Lying lawyers. Lawyers are often viewed as less honest and less ethical than most other professions. The classic story, To Kill a Mockingbird, depicted Atticus Finch, a lawyer who was forthright and honest. Unlike physicians, lawyers are saddled with the widely held stereotype that they are all liars and schemers. Interestingly, though attorneys are viewed as significantly less honest than doctors, they are viewed as no less professional. It seems that being dishonest is seen as part of the occupational landscape in the law. The occasional bending of the truth is aimed at benevolently helping their clients, much like medical professionals using deception to help their patients. According to the American Bar Association, a lawyer shall not knowingly make a false statement of material fact or law to a third person. That is, a lawyer should not lie. Do they? Bruce Green, the director of Fordham Law School's Louis Stein Center for Law and Ethics, argued that while outright lying is unethical, that ethical demand is in tension with the ethical obligation to zealously defend and serve one's client to the greatest degree possible. This delicate balancing act may rule out an outright lie by an attorney, but it leaves space for other forms of deception, such as concealment, exaggeration, misdirection, and withholding. Just like the noble doctor, the lawyers, to be effective, cannot lay all facts on the table, as many of those facts are bound to be problematic for their clients. They also do not tell outright lies without remorse. Rather, lawyers accept the challenge of generating economical versions of the truth. They tell the best version of the truth that they can. Some go much further than that, though. Attorney Michael Avenatti was sentenced to 14 years in prison and ordered to pay back millions in restitution to his victims. Over several years, Avenatti had represented several clients for whom he had secured million-dollar settlements. The only problem was that he kept the settlements for himself. He embezzled a multi-million-dollar settlement from one client, but promptly used the money to buy himself a private jet. He dishonestly claimed that the money was being wrongly withheld by the opposing attorneys. With other clients, he did the same thing, stealing money and then lying to cover his tracks. Politics. We hope not to shock you when we tell you that politicians sometimes lie. Early American presidents were regarded as pillars of integrity. In fact, people have mythically quoted George Washington as saying that he could not tell a lie when confronted about cutting down a cherry tree. Abraham Lincoln's uprightness led to him being given the nickname Honest Abe. Somewhere along the history timetable, American presidents and politicians traded the badge of honesty for a big liar trophy. A recent Gallup poll found that politicians are viewed as some of the least honest and ethical professionals. Accusations of being a big liar have tended to take the forefront in recent presidential elections, with candidates challenging the integrity of the opposing candidate by explicitly calling the other a liar. In the 2016 presidential election, Donald Trump accused Hillary Clinton of lying via covering up emails, and Clinton accused Trump of lying about taxes. Similarly, in the 2020 election, President Trump accused Joe Biden of lying about his role in his son's business, and Biden accused Trump of lying about the coronavirus threat. Mudslinging by way of the term liar is not a surprising strategy for presidential candidates, because perceived honesty is important for the job. One poll found that Americans consider a candidate's honesty to be the single most important factor in choosing a president, ranking it as more important than positions on the issues and questions of leadership, experience, and intelligence. Ironically, politicians who are opposed to lying tend to have lower re-election rates. Thus, lying tends to be reinforced in politics. Lying is pervasive in politics. In the United States, history portrays a parade of big liars at the top of the government. One can ponder about who is the bigger liar, the one who tells a single lie that launches the country headlong into a trillion-dollar war that costs hundreds of thousands of lives, or the liar who drips a steady stream of lies of less consequence. Robert Kennedy once said that Vice President, soon to be President, Lyndon Johnson, lies all the time. I'm telling you, he just lies continually about everything. He lies even when he doesn't have to lie. This statement was spoken of someone within his own administration, not a rival party. In his book, Lying in State, Alterman documented the long history of presidential deception, from Johnson's lies about the Vietnam War, to Nixon's prevarication about Watergate, to Reagan's untruths about the Iran-Contra affair, in which weapons were secretly sold, even though there was an arms embargo, to the sworn enemy of the United States, Iran, to fund a secret war in Nicaragua, even though Congress had forbidden such assistance. George H.W. Bush told lies about Kuwaiti babies being tossed from incubators by Iraqi soldiers to garner support for a U.S. invasion. Bill Clinton lied repeatedly about his extramarital affairs. George W. Bush spread lies about Iraq possessing weapons of mass destruction, drawing America into one of its longest and most costly wars. Barack Obama told lies aimed at hyping his agendas, downplaying his administration's shortcomings, and making disingenuous accusations about his rivals. For instance, he claimed, "We signed into law the biggest middle-class tax cut in history," despite the fact that many historical tax cuts had been considerably larger. No discussion of political big liars would be complete, however, without noting the remarkable capacity for deception of President Trump. He began his term with a lie. Despite the fact that it had rained throughout his inaugural address, he asserted, "And the truth is, it stopped immediately, and then became sunny, and I walked off, and it poured after I left. It poured." The Washington Post kept a running count of every false or misleading statement Trump made while in office. By the time his presidency ended, Trump had racked up an eye-popping 30,573 false or misleading claims. That amounts to an average of 21 lies for every day he was in office. Almost half of those lies were told during his final year in office. On a single day, he lied 189 times. Many commentators and historians have noted that, while all presidents have been documented liars, Trump was entirely unprecedented in how frequent and carefree he was with deception. For comparison, one analysis examined only blatant falsehoods and lies, not including misleading statements. They found that Trump told about 124 lies in his first year in office. By comparison, the Washington Post documented that Obama told about 2 each year during his 8 years in office. Trump began his presidency with boisterous lies about the size of his inaugural crowd, and he left office spreading the big lie that he had, in fact, actually won the election. Despite Trump's transparent lies, a Gallup poll late in his presidency found that over a third of U.S. adults still found Trump to be honest and trustworthy. Could it be that they believed his lies? People tend to believe stories if they believe the person sharing the story is trustworthy, regardless of the reliability of the person who produced the story. Research has shown that when people evaluate the veracity of stories online, they place more credibility on someone they trust than they do on a credible media outlet. So, if a trusted politician makes a false statement and a news outlet suggests it is a false claim, people may tend to place more belief in the politician they trust than the news source pointing out the lie. But why do people continue to support and follow politicians even after clear and compelling evidence indicates that those politicians are lying? It appears that most people fall victim to tribalism, selective perception, cognitive dissonance, motivated reasoning, and other bugs in our cognitive hardware. We often arrive at our conclusions via our visceral feelings, not the facts we are presented with. Tribalism is pervasive. We all have groups we belong to, whether they be sports teams we support, colleges from which we are alums, states in which we live, and so on. These are our people, and everyone else is the other. We prefer to affiliate with our tribe. We cut them slack when they make mistakes, we offer them preferential treatment, and we see them as better people. Tribalism even causes people to look the other way when people from their group lie. In one survey, 96% of people, both Republicans and Democrats, said they see honesty as absolutely essential or very important in political leaders. However, 55% of Republicans surveyed said that they would vote in 2020 for a presidential candidate who they believed would lie to cover up the truth. That's up from 12% of Republicans who said the same in 2015. Democrats tolerate lying, too. When Bill Clinton was caught lying about his sexual involvement with Monica Lewinsky, his approval ratings among his party remained largely unchanged. The reason that politicians are allowed by their supporters to get away with bald-faced lies is rooted in coalition psychology. Coalitions are groups of people who share an abstract identity in common. Coalitions can form around geographic proximity, phenotypic similarity, common experiences, similar belief systems, or common goals. As a cohesive group, coalitions act in unison, bound together in a shared identity to achieve common goals and defend common interests. Tooby, an anthropologist, argued that humans are identity-crazed. People readily identify as coalition members, whether the coalition be based on a religious, social, political, nationalistic, or other grouping. Coalitional membership allows members to amplify their power when they come into conflict with non-members. Imagine how a bar fight might play out if one of the combatants happens to have his rugby team with him. Coalitional members rally to the cause, supporting and defending each other and the ideological value structures that tether them together. But how do coalitions know for sure that a member will actually stand with them when called upon to fight? One way, Tooby argued, is to demonstrate loyalty by endorsing shared beliefs that are unique to the coalitions. In religions, for example, members unanimously endorse beliefs, such as that wine is transformed into blood, unseen angels hover above, rats are reincarnated people, faith will protect one from poisonous snake bites, or that by committing suicide, one's eternal soul can be rescued by alien gods in a spaceship hidden behind a comet's tail. Likewise, Tooby argued, political tribes bond together around shared beliefs, and the more absurd the beliefs that coalitions rally around, the more certain the coalition can be that each member is a true member. This process may explain Republicans' reactions to some of Trump's lies. When people who were once considered to have solid Republican credentials began to question the lies, such as the idea that the election was stolen from him, other members of the coalition saw them as traitors who deserved to be expelled from the group, or worse. Undeniable facts, rational arguments, and logic and reason did not matter. When coalitional members questioned the sacred dogma of the coalition, they showed that they could no longer be counted on. On the other hand, party members who were willing to repeat obvious falsehoods, even in the face of clearly contradictory evidence, were seen as true believers worthy of continued coalition membership. According to this theory, the more preposterous the lie people are willing to parrot, the more certain others can be of their devotion to the coalition. In this sense, a person saying that they believe a lie may not indicate their actual belief at all. Rather, the repetition of the lie merely signals the group a person sides with. Embracing lies is not solely an issue in Trumpian or conservative corners. The coalitional signals in some liberal coalitions include assertions such as that men and women have no innate differences and that hurtful words are literal violence, among others. These spurious claims are used for social cohesion. One such form of signaling is referred to as telling blue lies. Most people find lying to be morally objectionable. However, some lies are viewed as acceptable because they somehow serve the greater good of the group or tribe, binding the tribe together in a set of beliefs that, despite being factually untrue, signal a dedication to the group. In this sense, they are seen as pro-social and thus morally justified. Whether it is Trump's suggesting that Obama was not born in the United States, or Hillary Clinton's asserting that investigations into her husband's financial and sexual misconduct were part of a vast right-wing conspiracy, the lie is accepted by the loyal members of the coalition. Challenging the lie is seen as an overt act of disloyalty. Lies by politicians are exacerbated by their propagation across social media. Researchers found that during the final months of the 2016 U.S. presidential campaign, citizens were significantly more likely to read the top 20 fake news stories about the campaign, e.g., Pope Francis shocks world, endorses Donald Trump, than the top 20 most popular real news stories about the campaign. This finding is all the more concerning when one considers other research showing that most social media users are unable to discern real news stories from fake ones. Big liars seem to succeed in politics because the electorate often doesn't recognize the deception, and even when they do, they don't seem to mind. Conclusion. Societies are built on trust. To accomplish anything in a cooperative way, people must believe that others speak honestly. When big liars inhabit our worlds, it becomes challenging to know who can be trusted and who cannot. That breakdown of trust makes life itself difficult, as we must expend attention, effort, and energy trying to discern whether we should believe someone. And when we let down our guard, the big liars in the various spheres of society pounce, taking advantage of our gullibility. Whether in the world of business, politics, religion, or any other sphere of life, widespread lying does not usually come naturally. Rather, the acceptance of deception as a normal mode of operating is slowly developed over time. Lying perhaps feels uncomfortable and unethical at first, but with more and more exposure, people start to lose sight of the objectionable feelings about deception they once had. This habituation to dishonesty has been referred to as normalization of lying. If lying is common enough within a social environment, it becomes woven into the fabric of society. Slowly, what was once rare and condemned becomes familiar and forgivable. Lying becomes a sign of loyalty. Lying is rewarded. The harms caused by the lies are denied or minimized. Eventually, pervasive lying becomes the cultural norm. We look and find that big liars are all around us. This chapter covered the big liars that we encounter in broad societal contexts. Fortunately, these are not people with whom we typically have personal encounters on a regular basis. In Chapter 5, we examine the big liars with whom people are more apt to have intimate connections, including friends, family, and romantic partners. These are the people who, when they are big liars, are most capable of affecting us directly. Chapter 5. Lying to lovers and others in our lives. The worst part about being lied to is knowing you weren't worth the truth. Jean-Paul Sartre. In 2021, Chelsea Kernot had a pretty nice life. She was living in Virginia, where her fiancé was stationed in the Army. There were inconveniences, such as the fact that her fiancé, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Manzier, had to deploy overseas, and the fact that he was required to live on the Army base while Chelsea had to stay in town in an apartment he rented for her, but she was in love. soon to be married, and pregnant with their first child. Things took a turn one day when she called her fiancé to tell him that she was having contractions. He asked her not to bother him while he was at work, and then ignored her numerous texts and phone calls that followed. In desperation, she called his office staff, who said that he was away on leave. Frantic, she called his ex-wife to see if she knew of his whereabouts. What she heard must have left her dumbfounded. This wasn't Manzier's ex-wife. It was his current wife. They were still very much married after 18 years, although she was currently living in a different location with their 3 children. A little more digging uncovered that Manzier was actually living on a base with yet another woman with whom he was engaged. It turned out that, while married, he had been in serious long-term relationships with 6 women over 5 years. He had told each woman that he was divorced and that one of his children had died. He explained his long absences by saying that he was going away on overseas deployments. One woman, to whom he had been engaged several years earlier, said, "He's got his playbook. He tells these lies about his dead children, about his post-traumatic stress disorder, his deployments, and all the horrible things he's had to do. He creates all these imaginary traumas to cloak his lies in." In fact, he had not deployed since 2014. He faked deployment papers to go be with another woman. Manzier managed all of his transgressions by lying a lot. Each lie required several other lies to support it. Manzier was a big liar who left an enormous wake of heartache, strife, and shattered lives. In this chapter, we present examples of people like Lieutenant Colonel Manzier, big liars whose dishonesty contaminates their close relationships. All close relationships can be undermined by excessive liars, including people we meet on first dates, our romantic partners, friends, and family. We discuss the factors related to lying in close relationships, as well as the consequences of being in a relationship with those big liars. Lying in relationships. Dishonesty is common across contexts and various types of relationships, so it should perhaps not be surprising that it is also prevalent in romantic relationships. People say, "I love you," or "I want you," when they really don't. Some say they are not interested or not desirous of someone when they actually are. For instance, many people maintain different sex friendships, at least partly because of the prospect of having sex. People deceive their romantic partners in all manner of other ways. They deny being angry when they are fuming. They put on a brave face when they are terrified. They act interested when they are bored. They feign enthusiasm about plans that sound horrible. They offer supportive words, even when they are sure those words are untrue. In one study that examined dishonesty in romantic relationships, the researchers found that outright lying was the form of dishonesty that people used most, 45%, followed by exaggerations, half-truths, diversionary responses, and secrets. Over 1 week, people reported deceiving their partners an average of 5 times. The most dishonest people did so 11 times. The reasons they gave for their dishonesty included relational maintenance, e.g., reducing confrontation and restoring harmony, being supportive and protecting the feelings of their partner, balancing the needs of the partner versus their own, e.g., independence versus togetherness, trying to control a partner's behavior, and maintaining a previous lie. Only 3% reported using no deception over the week. Commitments of enduring love do not necessarily come with commitment of total honesty. Deception researcher Bella DiPaolo reported that married people tell their spouses small white lies in 1 of every 10 conversations. Non-married people tell white lies in 1 out of 3 conversations with their partners. DiPaolo argued that people are willing to tell white lies to their loved ones because when faced with the choice of either being frank and speaking a painful truth, e.g., "No, I did not really like that meal you prepared," or telling a kinder, gentler white lie, people often see the lie as the right thing to do. Bigger, more serious lies tend to be rare, However, they are more likely to be told to close relationship partners than to anyone else. DiPaolo found that 40% of the biggest lies were told to romantic partners. In a study of college students, 92% reported lying to their sexual partners. The most common lies were about the number of past partners they underreported, but participants also lied to spare their partner's feelings. For example, they lied a lot about how much they enjoyed the sexual experience with their partner. They falsely said complimentary things about their sexual partners, and they often exaggerated the depth of their feelings toward the person. In another study, DiPaolo and Casci found that people lie to their unmarried romantic partners in approximately 1 of every 3 interactions, which is more than they lied to their friends. Again, with spouses, people were considerably more honest, lying in only 1 out of 10 conversations. Williams examined lying in college students, finding that people were mostly honest with their sexual partners, and they tended to be most honest if they were in a close relationship, as opposed to in a casual one. The participants reported that they mostly told lies to protect their sexual partner's feelings, rather than for self-serving reasons. Metz compared married and non-married couples. For all couples, the most common reason for lying was to avoid hurting their partner's feelings. Dating couples tended to use complete fabrications, whereas married couples tended to lie by omission. Married couples told lies aimed at boosting their partner's self-esteem or preventing embarrassment, but dating couples were more likely to lie to protect their resources, avoid termination of the relationship, or avoid stress. The tripartite theory of lying and dishonesty contends that big liars are people who consistently believe others will respond undesirably if they are honest. We can see that sometimes lovers tell lies because they worry the truth would reveal relationship-ending details of one's bad behavior. Lies are also told to hide embarrassing details, such as information about one's sexual history. But people also tell lies to avoid hurting the feelings of people they are in relationships with. In all cases, lying has perceived utility. In her study examining people's willingness to tell lies in relationships, O'Sullivan was clear about who the biggest liars were. They tended to be men. She asked men and women how willing they would be to lie to a romantic partner about various topics. For each of the 14 topics, men were more willing to lie than women. The topics include lying about how much money they make or have, lying about birth control, lying about having a sexually transmitted disease, lying about how impressed they are by their partner's sexual anatomy or performance, lying about future plans such as marriage, exaggerating how attractive or intelligent they think their romantic partner is, saying they are in love when they are not, lying about how impressed they are by their partner's body or figure, lying about the time they spend with their friends, lying about their virginity, lying about things in their past that their partner would not approve of, telling a lie to spare their partner's feelings, lying about flirting with or being interested in other people, telling a lie to avoid having their partner get angry with them. Interestingly, O'Sullivan did not ask about willingness to lie to conceal infidelities, but the trend in her data suggests a strong possibility that men would express more willingness than women to do so. When one considers lies told in relationships, lies covering up infidelity often leap to mind. Every year since 1972, the National Science Foundation's General Social Survey has asked Americans about their sexual infidelities. For any given year, around 12% of men report having sex with someone other than their spouse. The rate is 7% for women. The lifetime incidence rates seem to be around 28% for men and 15% for women. In most studies of infidelity, men report much higher rates of infidelity than women do. This difference appears to be driven largely by differences in sexual interest and sexually permissive attitudes. Trees and Giesen found that when comparing men and women who held an equivalent interest in sex and had similar, permissive or stringent, attitudes towards sex, the differences in infidelity disappeared. Lies support infidelity. Given that men are much more likely to engage in infidelity, one can logically conclude that the big liars in that realm will tend to be men. Unfaithful big liars can come in more than one form. Some research has shown that people who are unfaithful once are more inclined to stray again. That is, big liars sometimes repeatedly initiate new romantic flings, and then lie to cover up each new dalliance. However, other big liars cultivate a single affair and lie for years to conceal it. They concoct such deep and pervasive lies that the very fabric of the supposed bond with their primary partner is a fraud. For 50 years, Jean Ann Cohn and her husband Douglas Cohn lived the good life in Tampa, Florida. They were multimillionaires, as Douglas owned a successful road construction company. Jean Ann drove a Rolls-Royce and sat on the board of the exclusive private school where they sent their 3 kids. They even had a building at the school named after them. The couple was noted to be very fond of each other and were very much a part of the Tampa social scene. Douglas often had to travel for work, so he was away most weekends. Eventually, it came to light that Douglas wasn't actually at work on the weekends. He was living with his second family 15 miles down the road. For almost 30 years, Douglas Cohn, under his alias Douglas Carlson, had shared a family life with Hillary Carlson. This family had striking similarities to Douglas's first family. He and his wife, Hillary, were also very affluent. Hillary drove a Rolls-Royce. Douglas and Hillary had 2 children who went to the same elite school as his other set of kids. Hillary and Douglas Carlson even had an athletics field at the school named after them. While many assume that Hillary knew of Douglas's original family, their 2 kids did not. Douglas explained his absence during the week as due to his highly sensitive government job. Douglas's big lies continued for nearly 3 decades, but there is no evidence that he had a reputation as a big liar. Recall that some big liars seem to have a specific facet of their lives that serve as the basis for their frequent lying. We describe them as a niche big liar. As Douglas Cohn's story illustrates, one dirty secret can require a bounty of lies to conceal. Lying to attract mates. Lying seems to be present from the very start of relationships, as many people use deception initially to attract romantic partners. Humans do not form romantic relationships randomly. We are selective. We search through a sea of prospects, hoping we find a person who seems likely to satisfy all our wants and needs. Is the person kind enough, physically attractive enough, affluent enough, serious enough, or funny enough? Do they have the right kind of education, religious and political beliefs, or job prospects? Are they loyal, brave, and earnest? Do they like the same type of music, foods, and vacations? Do they want the same things, such as a long-term relationship, marriage, and kids? We search around looking for that person who seems to fit the bill, or at least comes reasonably close to it. It perhaps is no surprise that men and women do not tend to look for the same traits in potential mates, although there is considerable overlap. Men and women each report an interest in romantic partners who seem kind, healthy, and intelligent. However, across cultures, men and women place other priorities differently. Women, more than men, tend to prefer someone who has good financial potential, who is ambitious and industrious, and who has high social status. Men, on the other hand, tend to prioritize mates who are young and physically attractive. We expect that the revelation that people are often not entirely honest in the dating marketplace is not surprising. If people believe prospective mates are looking for a particular set of attributes, they can cultivate and offer those attributes. For instance, if a man finds that the women he wants want a partner with a good job, he can go out and try to secure a good job. However, another possible route to attracting a mate is simply to pretend to have the traits that they believe potential mates are looking for. Based on this substantial body of research examining sex differences in mate attraction in heterosexual relationships, Buss argued that women tend to deceive about sex and men tend to deceive about commitment. He contended that women who are looking for men as mates tend to use the prospect of sexual access to entice them. Sometimes they use sex as a lure to bring men into committed relationships. Other times, he argued, women use the promise of sexual access to persuade men to buy expensive dinners, vacations, or other tangible rewards. Men looking to meet women, on the other hand, are more likely to fake an interest in a committed relationship or to feign feelings of affection that they don't actually have in order to gain sexual access. Thousands of dating sites are now online. These dating websites promise to use sophisticated scientific algorithms to help people identify and connect with ideal dating partners. Many people use the sites because they can quickly and efficiently find potential romantic partners without face-to-face encounters. On dating sites, men and women tend to lie at approximately equal rates. Of every 20 messages sent on those sites, about 3 are deceptive. The deceptive messages tend to occur most frequently at the beginning of a connection between two people and then decrease as the conversation progresses. The lies are mostly about impression management, i.e., trying to seem more desirable, and availability. Research suggests that men and women tend to tell different lies for the purpose of impression management. For instance, men tend to overstate their height, whereas women tend to understate their weight. Additionally, when men post profile photos, they tend to select photos that display wealth and status, e.g., an expensive car, whereas women tend to select photos of their younger selves. Big liars in the dating realm tend to have dark triad personality traits. They are high in Machiavellianism, meaning that they are comfortable manipulating prospective mates for their own purposes. They also tend to be high in narcissism, indicating that their sense of entitlement and preoccupation with their own needs leads them to use dishonesty to get what they want from romantic relationships. Finally, they are high in psychopathy, suggesting that their bold, antisocial orientation, coupled with a lack of empathy and remorse, leads them to use dishonesty and other treacherous tactics with romantic interests. A woman named Susanna described dating a person with dark triad traits this way. He said, "You are everything to me, my soulmate. You complete me. I desperately love and need you." It was the worst hallmark drivel mixed with truth and lies. It was all about his needs. It was always about his needs and keeping everyone else off balance to serve him. Complete parasite. They take pleasure in winning and conning people more than anything. Lying about sex. People lie as a way to gain sexual access. In one study, 34% of the college men who participated reported that they had lied to obtain sex, and 60% of the women reported that people had lied to them to gain sexual access. The college students in that study also reported that they lie about their sexual histories. 42% of the women and 4% of the men indicated that they had understated the number of sexual partners they had. Beyond lying to achieve a first sexual encounter, people continue to lie in the context of their sex lives. For instance, in one study, more than half the women reported that they fake orgasms. Men are also inclined to feign their levels of passion and enjoyment during sex, although it may be challenging for them to successfully fake orgasms. The motivation to feign sexual excitement is generally aimed at pleasing one's sexual partner or seeming sexy oneself. We examined the deception and lies that occur within the bedroom. In the first part of the study, we asked 151 men and women to describe one situation in which they had deceived a past or current partner in regard to sex. The people listed dozens of different types of deceptive acts, including cheating, faking orgasms, and claiming to be a virgin. Next, we took those several dozen categories of sexual dishonesty and created a survey. We then asked 330 men and women to indicate whether they had engaged in each form of sexual deception. It turned out that, on average, people said that they had lied about 8 of the sex-related topics. However, a few big liars admitted to lying about as many as 34 of the topics. The list of the top 15 lies that women reported telling their partners in the context of their sex lives, along with the percentage who reported telling each type of lie, is as follows. Faked orgasm or satisfaction during sex, 73%. Over-exaggeration of pleasure during sex, 69%. Deceived about enthusiasm to have sex, 65%. Lied about being too tired or sick for sex, 58%. Denied having sexual feelings for someone else, 43%. Lied about how much they enjoyed or were satisfied with their sex life, 42%. Lied about having interest in sex, 39%. Lied about how sexually attractive they found their partner to be, 36%. Lied about the amount of sexual experience they had, 34%. Lied about the type of sexual activity that they preferred, 32%. Lied about number of past sexual partners, 32%. Deceived them about having cheated on them, 30%. Lied about their sex drive, 30%. Lied and said their partner was good in bed, 27%. Lied about seeing the relationship getting more serious in the future, 24%. For men, the top 15 were deceived about enthusiasm to have sex, 51%. Faked orgasm or satisfaction during sex, 42%. Lied about use of pornography, 38%. Over-exaggeration of pleasure during sex, 37%. Denied having sexual feelings for someone else, 34%. Lied about how sexually attractive they found their partner to be, 34%. Lied about being too tired or sick for sex, 33%. Lied about seeing the relationship getting more serious in the future, 32%. Lied about overall relationship satisfaction in order to have sex, 32%. Lied about number of past sexual partners, 31%. Lied about the amount of sexual experience they had, 30%. Lied about the type of sexual activity that they preferred, 28%. Lied about how much they enjoyed or were satisfied with their sex life, 26%. Lied about the true strength of their feelings in order to have sex, 26%. Deceived their partner about having cheated on them, 26%. Two things caught our attention when we saw the results of the study. Our first observation was that men and women tended to lie about the same things. We found that 12 of the top 15 topics women lied about were also among the top topics that men lied about. Lying in the context of sex lives seems like one area of life in which women and men have established a certain degree of equality. Second, many of the lies seemed to be told for benevolent reasons, or at least not for entirely selfish reasons. Feigning enthusiasm, pleasure, and excitement are ways people try to protect the egos and feelings of people they care about in many situations, so perhaps we shouldn't have been surprised when those strategies appeared in the bedroom, too. Moral hypocrisy. Given that the tripartite theory of lying and dishonesty suggests that big liars consistently view their lying as morally permissible, how do lovers justify the morality of lying to their partners? Imagine a situation in which you see your long-term romantic partner leaving a restaurant with a former love interest after they promised that they would never meet up with the person again. Later, when describing their day, your partner neglects to mention that they met at the restaurant with their former love interest. How would you feel? How would your partner feel if you did that to them? One interesting study asked people to imagine just such a scenario and to take the perspective of the liar or of the person being lied to. The researchers found that people taking the perspective of the liar tended to view the lie as less wrong and blameworthy than did people who viewed the situation from the perspective of the person being lied to. Further, the people taking the perspective of the liar justified the lies with reasoning, such as that the partner would likely be insecure, jealous, and mistrustful. People taking the perspective of the person being lied to saw the lie as unjustified and wrong and viewed the liar as untrustworthy and dishonest. Thus, it seems that the perceived moral wrongness of lying and the moral attribution made about liars are matters of perspective. People seem to have a double standard. If I lie, it is ethically pardonable, but if you lie, it is not. Perhaps big liars are more inclined than others to engage in this double standard type of reasoning. The double standard seems to apply even to supposedly benevolent white lies. When people are asked to view a white lie from the perspective of the liar or from the person being lied to, a discrepancy appears. Liars see a white lie as not too bad or even justifiable, but when the same person views the lie from the perspective of the person being lied to, they suddenly view the lie as unjustifiable. In fact, some see a moral obligation or duty to tell these white lies, but think their partners should always give them the truth. This example shows moral hypocrisy. We have motivated biases. We want to see ourselves as good, even when we sometimes falter, but we don't give others that same benefit. Our self-serving evaluations of lying cut us slack when we are the liars and lead to moral indignation when we are the target of the lies. Dealing with lies. As we have made clear, people lie to their romantic partners, and some lie a lot. Evidence suggests that many of these lies may go undiscovered because people tend to place considerable trust in their partners. When they are discovered, the lies can be quite damaging. The recipients of the lies, upon discovering the deception, have strong negative emotional reactions. Being lied to by someone you care about hurts. The degree of involvement in the relationship and the importance of the information that was lied about are both significant predictors of how upset the victim of the deception is. In most cases, though the lies are upsetting, they do not result in the termination of the relationship. The vast majority of people do not end relationships when they discover their partner lying. Some researchers have examined couples' expectations for honesty in their relationships and the rules they form about lying. In relationships, partners are obligated to follow certain rules, such as a prohibition against lying about the sexual exclusivity of the relationship. However, many other rules regarding honesty are discretionary. That is, instead of puritanically insisting on total honesty, each person allows some discretion in deciding how forthcoming to be. For instance, a couple might not think it important to be absolutely honest about their enthusiasm to visit with each other's friends or family. Interestingly, the rules about honesty in relationships are usually unspoken, leaving each person to surmise what the actual rules are. While couples usually believe that they are in agreement about the relational rules for honesty, often they are not. A lack of consensus around obligatory rules for honesty can lead to significant conflict in relationships. Again, the disagreements stem from incorrect assumptions each person makes about what their partner believed. Perhaps the takeaway message here is that lying in relationships might be best addressed, and big liars avoided, by open and explicit discussion of each partner's expectations of honesty in the relationship. Lies in relationships, especially big lies, do more harm than good. Even when people feel the urge to tell helpful white lies to protect their partners do not view the lies as necessary or acceptable. People typically want the truth, even when the news is devastating. Even when lies might lead to a short-term benefit, the long-term consequences of relational dishonesty hardly seem a reasonable trade-off. Romance scams. Before joining the National Football League, Manti Te'o was a star football player at the University of Notre Dame. In 2009, he met and befriended a beautiful student on Facebook, Lene Kekua, who said she was a volleyball player at Stanford University. Manti and Lene messaged back and forth, and in 2011 their relationship became more serious and romantic. They texted and talked to each other on the phone regularly. Manti referred to her as his girlfriend. He intended to come to California to visit Lene, but she called to say that she was involved in a car accident, causing the trip to be postponed. Later, she told Manti that she had just been diagnosed with leukemia. In September 2012, the day after his grandmother died, Manti received a call from Lene's sobbing brother, who told Manti that Lene had passed away. Several days later, Manti mentioned her death in a post-game interview. The tragic story of Manti's loss made national headlines. However, Lene had not died. In fact, Lene did not exist. Manti had been lured into a multi-year catfishing scheme. Catfishing involves lying and misrepresenting oneself in an attempt to pursue an exclusively online dating relationship. The person to whom Manti had been professing his love was actually a man named Ronaya Tuiasosopo, who had even crafted a voice that was very convincing. Manti wasn't a lone sucker, though. Catfishing scams are fairly common on online dating sites. Fortunately, most daters do not take the bait. The perpetrators of catfishing scams often seem to be lying to meet a psychological need, such as attention, companionship, or entertainment, but other romance scammers seem to be in it for material rewards. For example, Takashi Miyagawa, a 39-year-old Japanese man, was arrested for defrauding his girlfriends, all 35 of them. He simultaneously dated all these women, promising to love them forever, in part, apparently, to extract gifts from them. He even told the various women different dates for his birthday to ensure that a steady stream of gifts came his way. Along with the proliferation of dating sites and the increased reliance on those sites for finding romantic connections has been a surge in internet dating scams. The scammers begin by creating fake profiles, usually with stolen pictures of an attractive person. The scammer then proceeds to make contact with dupes. Once contact has been made and the dupe seems interested, the scammer spends time building trust through regular warm and affectionate communications. The scammer leads the victim to believe that they are perfectly matched. After the scammer has convinced the victim of the legitimacy of the connection, they begin to declare their passion and love for the victim and suggest meeting in person. The scammer inevitably postpones the meetup, however, claiming emergencies such as hospitalizations, death of loved ones, or accidents. These alleged emergencies often lead to requests for money. In some cases, the scammer asks for money to cover the travel expenses so that they can come to see the victim. Gradually, the requests for small sums increase until the requested amounts exceed what the victim is capable of or willing to send. We documented a case of a person who fell victim to a romance scam. The scammer, allegedly a very attractive and kind person, spent several weeks grooming the victim by establishing rapport, sharing personal information, and flattering the victim. The scammer initially requested financial assistance to buy an airline ticket to visit the victim. On the day they were to arrive, the scammer contacted the victim and claimed that they had accidentally flown to the wrong city, and the victim sent more money to help this big liar buy a bus ticket to complete the trip. But alas, as the scammer was getting off the bus, they were allegedly hit by another bus, requiring hospitalization. More money was needed to help cover part of the medical bill. The injuries supposedly required the person to fly home to recover, so the meeting was postponed. More money was sent to help the injured person fly home. Out of work because of their injuries, the scammer asked for more money to pay rent and buy groceries. No amount of reasoning from family members could convince the victim that this was all a scam. The relationship felt too real, too intimate, and too good. By the time the victim acknowledged the scammer had fleeced them of thousands of dollars. When the victim stopped responding to the scammer attempted to blackmail the victim, threatening to post online nude photos that the victim had naively sent to the scammer. The powerful longing for love and connection can drive many people to turn a blind eye to the little red flags that seem so clear to everyone else. One group of researchers studied online deception to try to understand these online big liars. The study examined all people who lie about themselves online, not only scammers. They concluded that people who misrepresent themselves online tend to view online lying as permissible. The online liars reported that they found it very exhilarating to fool people online, a practice that has been labeled as duping delight, and they described themselves as uncooperative and not very concerned with morality or the welfare of others. They also reported that they were manipulative and disinclined to keep promises they had made. These characteristics are ones that people should absolutely want to avoid in romantic partners, online or otherwise. To whom do people lie? People don't lie indiscriminately. They tend to lie more to some people than to others. Fortunately, the people who are closest to us are also the ones least likely to lie to us. That is not to say that the people closest to us don't lie to us. They do, but they tend to lie more often to strangers and acquaintances. While people lie less often to people with whom they feel closest, when those lies do occur, they are much more likely to inflict pain. Just imagine how upsetting it would be to find out your most trusted friend lied to you than it would to learn about a complete stranger doing the same. Rather than identifying categories of people who lie to us most, it may be helpful to frame the topic in terms of the types of people who are lied to most often. Think of the types of people to whom you might be more apt to lie, and those to whom you might be less likely to lie. In her research, DiPaolo analyzed the content of reports that liars provided to her, and found that they most often directed their lies towards certain types of people. They tended to tell lies to people who viewed them extremely favorably. For example, imagine a person who thinks that her grandchild is the most amazingly brilliant person in the world, and who brags to her friends all day long about that grandchild. It would be hard to let her know that the grandchild failed out of college or was fired from a job. They also tended to lie to people who had very high moral standards. For example, imagine that one of your neighbors is a religious leader and another neighbor is on parole after an arrest for burglary. With which neighbor would you be more comfortable honestly discussing the fact that you passed out from drinking the night before? We all fear the sting of harsh judgment from others, and we tend to view people who stand on moral high ground as likely to see us as wretches. Thus, we are more apt to lie to them. Lying often occurs when people interact with others they truly admire. For example, if I think you are amazing and can't get enough of you, I might not want to risk rejection by sharing the awful truth about myself. People are also more likely to lie to powerful people or people with high status. One truth about the world is that people who hold status and power wield the ability to cause good or bad things in our lives. Most people would feel uncomfortable letting their boss know that they failed to complete a report on time, but they might not mind at all telling a coworker the same. People tend to lie to people whom they fear. Some people tend to be intimidating or even mean, and sharing truthful feelings with them makes people feel very uneasy. Sometimes lying seems much less risky than being honest. People also lie to others who are easily hurt or upset by the truth. Imagine that the person you recently started dating is as fragile as an eggshell and bursts into tears and becomes a basket case any time life is disrupted or things don't go their way. If you wanted to break up with them, would you tell them you realized that you don't like them anymore? Maybe a little "it's not you, it's me" fib would offer a cleaner exit. People lie, and they seem to lie to certain types of people more than others. Friends and family. An examination of honesty in friendships shows that even people who have our backs are willing to lie to us. While dishonesty in casual friendships is quite prevalent, it is reassuring to know that people in very close friendships lie significantly less often. Furthermore, the types of lies they tell are different. In casual relationships, people tend to tell self-serving lies, but in close friendships, the lies tend to be much more altruistic. For example, People tend to tell lies that reassure their close friends, boost their egos, and generally make them feel good. People try to show care and understanding and to strengthen the bonds of friendship by psychologically bolstering their friends, even when they need to do so by twisting the truth a bit. In studies of lying in friendships, one finding is that people who are most anxiously attached tend to do most of the lying. That is, people who are anxious that telling the truth will jeopardize the strength of their friendships tend to lie more often. As we discussed in Chapter 2, kids begin lying at an early age, and much of their lying is directed at their parents. That lying seems to peak in the late teenage years. Studies examining lying among high school students have found that, not surprisingly, they lie a lot. To be exact, in one study, they lied 75% more than college students and 150% more than adults. The teens in that study told an average of 4.1 per day, but some told as many as 17 lies per day. L.A. Jensen et al. Also found that high school students lie frequently to their parents. The lies tend to be about matters in which they might experience disapproval, such as friends, dating, parties, alcohol and drugs, and sex. Teenagers' reasons for lying tend to be attempts to assert autonomy. Many parents continue to exercise great control over their children's lives at exactly the point when those children are transitioning into adulthood and seeking to control their own lives. Perhaps late adolescence is the perfect set of circumstances for lying to emerge. The tripartite theory of lying and dishonesty posits that people will lie when they believe that important others will respond negatively if they tell the truth. During late adolescence, teens tend to want to break from parental restrictions and to do what they want when they want, but many parents are still trying to exercise behavioral control. That mixture of discordant goals and imbalanced power is a fine recipe for dishonesty. During our research for this book, we heard the story of a teenager who began lying to his parents shortly after he began college at age 18. The parents planned to pay for their son's tuition, housing, and expenses during his 4 years of college. However, shortly into his first semester, the young man stopped attending classes, as he found them to be insufferably boring. Instead, his days were filled with video games and leisurely afternoons with friends. When the semester ended, the student was in a bind. His parents saw a college education as the only real path into adulthood, yet he had failed all his courses. Rather than deal with the consequences of his choices, the student told his parents that he had done well and was looking forward to the following semester. Shortly into the next semester, the pattern repeated, with the young man again failing all classes and ultimately being suspended from the college. Again, not wanting to disappoint his parents, he told lies about his successful progress through all his interesting coursework. The lie had grown into a monstrosity. The bigger the lie became, the more catastrophic telling the truth became. He put off coming clean semester after semester until finally it was time to graduate. With family coming into town and his parents making their arrangements to celebrate at the graduation ceremony, the young man had finally run out of options. He admitted to his parents that he had spent tens of thousands of their dollars hanging out for 4 years. Although they forgave him, the rupture in their relationship was immense. Even as adults, people lie to their parents. The lies often begin early in life as kids attempt to escape punishment or gain a little freedom. As adults, many people still place a high value on the judgment of their parents. They will go to great lengths to avoid disappointing mom or dad. Kids lie the most when they are still living at home under direct parental control. As they move into adulthood, their lies typically diminish as they establish autonomy and develop adult relationships with their parents. However, some habits die hard, and some parent-child relationships remain stunted, with the parents offering harsh judgment and the now-grown children fearing their parents' judgment and control. So, even as adults, many people continue lying to their parents. Parents lie to their kids, too. In one case, a kid had a favorite pet, a cat named Oliver. One day, Oliver could not be found. He was not in any of his usual hangouts. When the child told his mother that he could not find Oliver, she said he was probably around somewhere. Days later, when the kids expressed concern that Oliver was still absent, his mom suggested that Oliver may have run away and found a new place to live, as cats sometimes do. The boy was sad, but eventually moved on. Years later, as an adolescent, the boy's mother revealed that Oliver had actually been hit by a car and killed in front of their house. His mother had lied to him to spare him grief from the loss. Such lies told to loved ones are not uncommon. In a study in which people were asked about the biggest lie that had ever been told to them, 12% of participants reported lies in which a caring person, usually a parent, lied to them to conceal a serious disease or a death that might be distressing. Though the lies were intended to be caring and helpful, the recipient of the lie typically didn't see it that way. One participant wrote, "Even when people lie to protect other people or because they think they're doing the right thing, you don't necessarily see it that way." Another participant wrote, "You can't really determine for the person when they are going to grow up and they're going to have to face things. You should get the chance to face your reactions yourself and not have someone decide for you how you're going to react." From telling kids that an injection won't hurt to lies about Santa Claus, parents use dishonesty to manipulate their children. In a small study we carried out, we found that most people view lying to children as more morally permissible than lying to adults. However, parents should be aware that lying to their kids increases the odds that their kids will lie to them. In that sense, parents who are big liars with their kids are likely to produce kids who are big liars in return. Additionally, a growing body of evidence suggests that children whose parents lie to them are more likely to have poor psychological adjustment. Though lying to kids is often a convenient way to gain control, the long-term consequences may not be worth it. Conclusion. In this chapter, we have covered the various forms of lying that occur in close relationships, including dating, long-term relationships, friends, and family. The research in this area suggests that while the extent of prolific lying may depend on the type of relationship, lying occurs in them all. Anecdotally, when we ask people about the biggest liars they have ever met, many people identify a romantic partner. People use deception to help form relationships and to maintain those relationships over time. Although lying is a common occurrence in close relationships, many of the lies in this context are not told with malicious intent. Rather, people lie to help navigate the inevitable competing interests that arise in any relationship. In fact, many of the lies that people tell in their closest relationships are intended to benefit the target of the lie. However, evidence suggests that lying, even when well-intended, can erode the foundation of a relationship, and big liars often cause their relationships to collapse. We return to the consequences of being in a relationship with a big liar in Chapter 8. In Chapter 6, we examine the strategies and techniques that big liars use to deceive the people around them. How is it that someone can so easily convince us of something that is not true? Big liars have a toolbox of techniques to seem believable when they are not, and when we can identify these techniques, we can begin to uncover the many ways that big liars pull the wool over our eyes. Chapter 6. The Liar's Toolbox. When truth is replaced by silence, the silence is a lie. Yevgeny Yevtushenko. On February 21, 1993, Aldrich Hazen Ames was arrested by the FBI outside his home in Virginia. He told the agents, "You're making a big mistake. You must have the wrong man." However, they had the right man. Ames was lying. He actually had a long history of lying. Ames had a 31-year career as a CIA officer. Early in his career, he was tasked with trying to identify and recruit potential Soviet intelligence officers to provide critical intelligence to the United States. Ames wasn't very successful in that role, so he was assigned to other jobs, such as managing spies who were already providing the United States with information. He wasn't particularly adept in that role either. He was noted to be a procrastinator who was inattentive to important details and forgetful. It was believed that he drank too much, and that occasionally his drunkenness interfered with his work. Ames's personal life was shaky too. He had numerous affairs, and eventually his marriage fell apart. Fearing his spousal support payments and a costly new girlfriend might bankrupt him, Ames decided to sell CIA secrets to the Soviets. While his plan was to make a one-time deal to exchange some fairly mundane secrets for $50,000, his dealings with the Soviets progressed. By that time, and despite his unremarkable performance at work, Ames was assigned to the super-sensitive Soviet counterintelligence unit and began to provide critical details about CIA operations to the Soviets. He passed along more and more damaging information about American espionage activities, warning his Soviet handlers about each American asset operating in Soviet bloc countries. The Soviets rewarded Ames's betrayals with larger and larger payments. Soon the Americans began to notice that their spies were disappearing, scooped up by the KGB, tortured and interrogated, and then executed. Ames carried out his spying scheme for years. The CIA finally focused on Ames as the mole who was giving away U.S. secrets. They noted that, despite his modest salary, Ames indulged in an immodest lifestyle. He wore exquisite suits, drove luxury automobiles, and had purchased an extravagant and quite expensive house. When asked about his opulent displays, Ames claimed that his new wife came from a very affluent family. As the investigators looked closer into Ames, they found that he had massive credit card bills. His phone bill alone was more than his salary could cover, and there was no evidence that his wife was contributing to their bank account. By the time the investigators arrested Ames, he had been betraying his country for almost 8 years. His activities had led to the identification of nearly all the intelligence assets that the CIA had working against the Soviet Union at the peak of the Cold War. Almost a dozen were executed. In exchange, the KGB had paid Ames more than $4 million. How did someone working in such a sensitive role for the CIA manage to do so much damage for so long without getting caught? The short answer is that he lied. But wouldn't the CIA expect people to lie from time to time? Wouldn't they be on the lookout for turncoats in their midst? In fact, they were vigilant. They required CIA officers to take polygraph exams regularly and to answer questions about all manner of nefarious activities. While Ames was spying for the Soviets, he took 2 polygraph exams. When he first found out that a polygraph exam was impending, Ames was terrified. He was certain that he would be discovered and his house of cards would collapse. It turned out, though, that Ames passed the exams. How did he manage to successfully deceive the supposed expert lie detectors for so many years? Did the Soviets give him a special gadget that beat the test? Had he learned some special psychological trick during his work as a spy? Not at all. When he asked his KGB handlers what to do, they told him to just relax, don't worry, you have nothing to fear. When he met with the polygraph examiners, he acted friendly. He was warm and personable. He acted normal. In this chapter, we discuss how people such as Aldrich Ames pull off their deceit. An examination of the task of lying provides insights into what a liar must do to successfully fool others. We then consider the various strategies that liars, by their own admission, use to appear sincere when they are being dishonest. We also explore the features that allow some big liars to seem believable while others seem transparently dishonest. Finally, we discuss the manipulation tactics that successful big liars have used to convince large groups of people to accept their falsehoods. Lying is different from telling the truth. It is typically more challenging. The liar must avoid revealing the truth, fabricate a false experience, and all the while seem to be unfazed. On the fly, liars must generate false accounts that are factually coherent and do not conflict with other known facts. Furthermore, the liar must be able to remember and recount details consistently, possibly over multiple retellings. Liars must conceal their effort, their anxieties, and their guilt. Liars risk giving themselves away because lying entails 4 specific problems. First, lying produces a generalized state of psychological arousal, and that arousal can be detected. We can often gauge when someone is relaxed and when they are not. Signs of nervousness might give a liar away. Second, lying often causes people to feel pronounced emotions, such as fear, guilt, or shame. Concealing emotions can be a tricky task. We've all probably tried to feign interest in a boring story or acted more excited than we truly were at receiving a gift that didn't quite hit the mark. Third, lying is a cognitively demanding task. Liars must be quick and sharp to pull off such an effortful task. When pressed with effortful tasks, we often act differently. Just try not to appear to be working hard when attempting to remember a phone number or when counting backward by 7s. Fourth, and finally, as we work hard to conceal evidence of the first 3 problems, we risk acting strangely in our attempts to act normal. If you ever have to walk across a room when an audience is staring at you and you think for even a moment about trying to walk normally, you may soon find out that you are, ironically, creating an abnormal gait or an unusual swing of your arms. Liars attempt to appear effortlessly honest, but lying is an emotionally, behaviorally, and cognitively taxing endeavor. It is work, and if people notice that liars are working hard, they may grow suspicious. Like Ames, big liars who successfully pass themselves off as honest are able to conceal the arousal, emotions, and cognitive effort associated with lying, and thus convincingly appear calm and collected. We can use 2 approaches to understand how liars lie. The first approach is simply to ask liars what they do when they are lying. Their own accounts can provide invaluable information about how they manage their behavioral repertoire. Their self-reports can give us insights into their toolbox of techniques and strategies for lying. A second approach is to watch people carefully as they are lying. We can attentively note their behavior when they are telling the truth and then observe them when we know they are lying. If their deception has some revealing clue, we might be able to spot it if we look closely enough. Research suggests that people readily report the techniques or strategies they implement when telling falsehoods. They realize that if they hope to seem believable, they must work at it. If people know they are lying, and especially if they fear being caught in their lies, they might worry, struggle to come up with believable lies, or try to conceal the evidence of their guilt. These features of lying can lead to detection. People cloak their misdeeds behind a false veil of earnestness and honesty. In one study, participants who had committed a mock crime were then interrogated by actual police officers. The participants lied, and they reported feeling very nervous and finding that lying about the crime was extremely difficult. When asked, 90% of the liars reported using a specific strategy to appear honest. In another study, including incarcerated people, researchers asked the participants about how they tell convincing lies. These individuals revealed that strategic planning was an important component of telling lies that would be believed. Both truth-tellers and liars plan what they will say during an interrogation. However, liars also plan how they will behave, whereas truthful people usually do not. Honest people are less planful and less defended than dishonest people, because they often have a naive belief that innocence will shield them from any harm. Liars, on the other hand, know that their freedom from punishment hinges on their ability to be believed, so they pull out all the stops to present a believable act. How liars say they lie. We conducted a study to explore how liars report carrying out their deceptions. We gathered together more than 200 people and gave them the following prompt. When people lie, they often use strategies to conceal their deception and make themselves appear truthful to others. Describe the strategies that you use when you are lying to others. The participants then spent the next 15 minutes writing detailed accounts of the strategies and techniques that they use to tell convincing lies. Afterward, our team of researchers analyzed the hundreds of pages of responses. We sorted the responses into individual lie techniques and then tabulated the reported techniques to determine which ones were used most often. We aimed to generate a list of people's most common lie strategies. We found that many people reported using multiple strategies and that people tended to rely on the same deceptive strategies to fool others. The strategies that people reported using generally fell into two large groups, those used to manage speech and those used to manage bodily behavior. People were slightly more likely to report body management strategies, 59%, than to use speech management strategies, 41%. The 8 body management techniques, from most widely used to least, were reported. Make eye contact, 22%. People reported that they intentionally tried to maintain or increase the amount of eye contact they made with the person to whom they were lying. For instance, one person wrote, "I looked them dead in the eyes." Others described similar tactics to hold eye contact or said they avoided looking away when lying. Control facial emotional expression, 21%. People reported that they attempted to manipulate their facial expressions, especially expressions of emotion, to present a believable countenance. They wrote about trying not to let the look of fear or surprise appear on their face. For instance, one person wrote, "I just tried to keep a straight face." Act calm, confident, normal, 20%. Responses in this category indicated a general strategy of attempting to appear calm, confident, or normal when lying. People wrote that they tried to maintain a normal demeanor. For example, one person stated, they act as if nothing was wrong or different. Don't fidget, 14%. People claimed that they intentionally controlled or reduced fidgeting with their hands or feet and otherwise attempted to maintain normal body movements, such as crossing their arms to minimize any urges to fidget. One person wrote that they try not to fidget, play with my hands or ears, because for me that is a sign of lying. Act emotional, 8%. Some people wrote that when they lied, they tried to appear more emotional than they actually felt, such as by feigning upset or crying. They seemed to think that emotionality would convince others of their truthfulness. They wrote things such as, "I forced myself to cry and act upset to be more believable," and "I have tried to act really excited about something that was greatly exaggerated." Act serious or sincere, 6%. This category included general efforts to appear more serious or sincere than one felt. People who reported these techniques said things such as that they just try to be as serious as possible, or that they look very serious or sincere. Avoid eye contact, 5%. Interestingly, and despite the fact that most people believe that the inability to make eye contact is a sure sign of lying, some people reported just such a strategy. They reported attempts to conceal their eyes or otherwise avoid making eye contact. For example, some said, "I wouldn't look the person in the eye," "I try not to make eye contact," and "I looked at the ground." While this hardly seems like a wise strategy, it is important to keep in mind that while most people are superb liars, some are absolutely incapable of telling a believable lie. Increase body movement, 4%. A small percentage of people indicated that they increased body movement to appear more believable. For example, one person wrote, "Try to use hand gestures and body language to get the story across." The following 6 strategies related to speech manipulation, from most frequent to least frequent, were reported. Manage tone, pitch, 37%. People reported efforts to alter and manage the tone of their voice or their vocal pitch, for example, by trying to have a confident-sounding tone of voice, using a serious tone, and trying not to let the pitch of their voice rise. Sound normal, 19%. Some participants directly said that they focused on trying to sound normal as they spoke untruths. They mentioned attempts to speak in a manner consistent with their normal speech. For example, "I tried to sound like I normally would," and "the conversation or response is normal and relaxed." Control the details, 16%. People suggested that they worked to manage the amount or the nature of the details and evidence that they shared, withholding key information, or sometimes adding details in an attempt to sound convincing. For example, they reported, "I tried not over-exaggerating my story," and "I also might try to give more details than necessary to try to make it seem realistic." Speak clearly, 15%. Some people claimed that their strategy was to speak clearly and steadily to avoid detection. They avoided stammering or stuttering, and they tried to avoid pauses and delays in their responses. For example, they wrote, "I tried not to mumble or stutter while talking," and "I try to speak with a clear voice and not stumble over words." Rate of speech, 7%. People indicated that when lying, they make an effort to adjust the pace of their speech. They mentioned things such as forcing themselves to speak slowly, e.g., "forced myself to speak slowly," or quickly, e.g., "talk faster." Volume, 5%. These strategies involve the person increasing, decreasing, or attempting to maintain their speaking volume, e.g., "talk in a voice that sounds quieter," or "I would raise my voice." In addition to these 14 categories, participants reported a handful of other techniques that didn't easily or logically fit into a grouping. Some of these unique strategies struck us as quite odd. For instance, people reported, "I will usually bite the side of my lip or roll my tongue to the side. I cough. I cuss a lot. I rub my temples like I'm getting frustrated. And I walk away." Participants reported only a small number of these strange lie strategies. Overall, we found that most of the liars in our study tended to rely on a relatively small group of techniques to appear honest. Other researchers have taken similar approaches to ours, asking people to report how they have attempted to fool others with their lies. In one study, researchers paid participants to commit a mock theft. They then interrogated the participants, who were instructed to lie to avoid detection. Afterward, the researchers interviewed the participants about the strategies and techniques they thought were important for crafting and telling believable lies. Many said they prepared and mentally rehearsed their lies. By planning what they would say and the fictitious details they would provide, the liars aimed to reduce the cognitive workload they would certainly experience once the interrogations began. Knowing how one is going to respond to questions reduces the stress and anxiety that come along with having to think quickly. Having a prepared story reduces anxiety, as one already has the false narrative figured out. The prepared stories help the liar to avoid contradictions and allow them to note sensitive information that must be withheld to preserve the believability of the lie. The participants also widely reported concerns about presenting the right amount of detail in their lies. They worried that providing too little information or too much information would appear suspicious. The details must be abundant enough to resemble an actual memory of a real event, but not so many as to appear like an exaggerated appeal. Another common strategy was to mention emotional details. They indicated that sharing how one felt during a fictitious story would make the story seem more believable. Additionally, they also noted mentioning peripheral details that had no central bearing on the lie, a strategy that was also thought to make the story seem more genuine. All the while, the liars reported that they told stories that were both coherent and consistent. Stories with discrepant details are not believable, nor are stories that change over time. Another broad category of strategies involved impression management. It's not only what one says that helps a liar avoid suspicion, it's also how they say it. Foremost, the liars reported trying to appear calm and confident. They also tried to sound as if they were quite accurate and not prone to mistakes. To pull off this charade, they mentioned making eye contact, managing the tone of their voice, and attempting to sound confident. Big liars like Aldrich Ames capitalize on these techniques. They plan what they will say. They choose their words carefully. They say enough, but not too much, and they say it all with a genuine seeming demeanor. Good liars. In one recent study, scientists found that people who are good at lying actually lie significantly more than people who are not good at it. That is, big liars tend to be good liars. It makes sense, then, to ask the good liars how they do it. The researchers' first finding was that good liars tend to rely heavily on manipulating what they are saying, rather than dwelling too much on manipulating their body language. The good liars were much more likely to attribute their success to a handful of strategies. Though big liars lie a lot, they are usually honest when they speak. Successful liars lie selectively. A good liar realizes that if their every word were a lie, they would soon be seen as a dishonest communicator, and their lies would no longer be convincing. They lie sparingly, and only when they really have something to gain. Good liars realize that deception is a tool that is most effective when they are trusted. Successful liars tend to embed their lies in a cloud of truth. If a big liar is going to try to pull one over on you, they will likely bury a single lie in a vast jumble of truths, obscuring the deceit. They also report that when telling a lie, they try to match the number of details to the number of details they typically provide when telling the truth. It's not only the amount of details either. It is also the type. If, when telling the truth, a good liar tends to talk about their thoughts and feelings, they will also talk about thoughts and feelings when lying. Good liars also try to keep their yarns clear and simple. Clear and simple lies are easy to generate, easy to remember, and not likely to conflict with other known information. Better yet, good liars try to provide unverifiable details. For instance, if a lie involves no other people, then nobody can contradict the story. Good liars also focus on telling plausible lies. An outlandish story is likely to draw unwanted attention and scrutiny. If asked where you were last night, "I watched television and then went to bed," is much more plausible than "I decided to go ostrich hunting." Finally, good liars are avoidant. They strategically try to avoid being questioned. If they can dodge the questions entirely, it is unlikely they will be caught lying. Reviewing the research literature on proficient liars, we can single out 18 traits and characteristics that seemed to facilitate especially successful liars. 1. Good liars are natural manipulators. They aren't nervous about manipulating others. Rather, they are confident, dominant, and relaxed as they exploit others. 2. Good liars are good actors. Lying, like other forms of impression management, is a game of projecting a specific version of oneself into the world. Good liars take the stage and play the role of an honest person. 3. Good liars, as good actors, must be expressive. They must be animated with believable enthusiasm and emotion. 4. Good liars tend to be physically attractive. People have a powerful cognitive bias known as the halo effect. This bias refers to the tendency to allow one positive trait of a person to influence our judgments about other unrelated dimensions of that person. One powerful example of a halo effect involves physical attractiveness. Attractive people are illogically viewed as being more capable, kind, friendly, intelligent, and trustworthy than less attractive people. A physically attractive person will also be viewed as more honest than a less attractive person. 5. Good liars are dynamic performers. They can rapidly adapt their demeanor to dynamic changes in the context. What the situation demands, they can deliver. 6. Good liars practice their craft. They have a wealth of prior experience in deception. That practice pays off, as they have figured out tricks to help them manage fear and guilt, and they have honed excellent acting skills. 7. Good liars believe in their ability to lie well. That confidence reduces their anxiety and helps them sell the story to the audience. 8. Good liars are adept at feigning emotions. Whether expressing happiness, surprise, sadness, or contempt, good liars can wrinkle their brows, raise their eyebrows, or bare their teeth in convincing ways that belie their true emotions. Researchers have found that expressive people are viewed as likable and sympathetic. Emotional expressivity also helps people seem honest. 9. Good liars are excellent orators. They are eloquent. They can find just the right words at just the right time to say exactly what they think someone wants to hear. 10. Good liars are prepared for the lie. They rehearse and plan. Getting caught with one's pants down, searching and stumbling for a good excuse, is a surefire way to get tangled up and caught in a lie. A well-prepared and organized narrative makes a lie seem natural and free from contradictions. 11. Good liars choose their details carefully. The worst thing a liar can do is provide verifiably false details. Someone cannot believably say that they stayed at home when their credit card bill shows that they ate at a restaurant and went to a nightclub. Several years ago, an acquaintance of ours drove out of town to engage in an affair while his girlfriend was away visiting her family. While hundreds of miles away from home, carrying on his fling, he texted and called his girlfriend, reassuring her that he was having a boring few days at home. There was one problem, though. He got a speeding ticket while out of town. That piece of evidence, if discovered, would clearly expose his lie. A good liar would have included details that could not be so easily uncovered, for instance, saying that he was traveling to Dallas for some other vague and unverifiable reason, such as sightseeing. 12. Good liars say as little as is necessary. The more a person speaks, the more the person offers details that might undermine the lie. Effective liars say enough to be believed, but no more. 13. Good liars avoid creating stories that don't check out by simply telling, mostly, the truth. They concoct stories that adhere to the truth almost entirely, up to the point that the truth becomes untenable. Then, and only then, do they insert false information. 14. Good liars are creative. When being interrogated, they never know what question is going to come next, so the ability to create a realistic, yet fake version of reality is imperative. Those gifted with the facility to invent new ideas will be most successful. 15. Good liars also think fast. People who take too long to respond or suddenly use time fillers such as and don't sound believable. 16. Good liars are smart. Juggling the components of a lie or creating a believable scenario with details that do not conflict with what the other person may or may not know is a chore. Lying is a cognitively demanding feat that is aided tremendously by intelligence. 17. Good liars keep their facts straight. Effective liars remember what they said and to whom they said it. Lying is complicated, so a good memory is key. A person who lies must remember all the details. When honest people are asked to recount a story on 2 separate occasions, they reconstruct a memory of what occurred. However, memory is imperfect and malleable, so their retelling often shifts and changes from one occasion to the next. Each reconstruction is slightly different, with some details remembered, others forgotten, or some insights added. This shifting nature of truthful recollections can sometimes appear to listeners as evidence of deception. To avoid sounding dishonest, then, good liars avoid this reconstruction-on-the-fly strategy of storytelling. Instead, they focus on repeating the story as precisely as possible each time. Their goal is to have zero variation between retellings. Zero variation means that listeners have no discrepancies to key in on. In other words, liars repeat rather than reconstruct. Some lies are maintained for decades, and keeping the story straight for that long may require above-average mnemonic abilities. 18. Finally, good liars are good listeners. They take the pulse of their audience, recognizing when their listeners want more information, when they are satisfied, when they start to grow suspicious, and when it is safe to change the topic. Big liars persist because they are good at their craft. They have learned to use deceit successfully to achieve their goals. If their lies consistently failed, they would likely abandon dishonesty and try something else. By mastering a handful of skills, big liars have learned to persuasively convince others of something that is not true. What does an honest person look like? One would think that a good liar is someone who can perfectly mimic the look and behavior of someone who is telling the truth. Surprisingly, the ability to perfectly emulate honest people is not the skill that makes good liars believable. Instead, they have mastered the ability to act like what others think an honest person looks like. Many people have misconceptions about what honest behavior looks like. Primarily, they believe that honest people make a lot of eye contact and don't fidget. These inaccurate beliefs are folk wisdom. Good liars succeed not because they act honestly, but because they act like the caricature of an honest person. When we meet a person for the first time, we form a first impression of them. As we interact with them more, typically our impression of them is remarkably stable and tends to remain intact even when we are presented with contradictory evidence. Our impressions of others are based on a variety of factors, including their gender, race, age, attire, cosmetics, speech, attractiveness, and behavior. The sociologist Irving Goffman wrote about the dynamics of impression formation in his book, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. He argued that we all attempt to manage our social value by managing impressions. We actively attempt to influence how we are perceived by others. One mechanism we use in this effort is crafting our demeanor. We manage the way we act, the expressions on our faces, and the ways in which we carry ourselves. A critical finding in the study of deception was realized over the course of several studies. Some people, because of their demeanor, simply appear more honest, while others, unfortunately, seem less honest. That is, regardless of the actual veracity of someone's statement, some people just look more believable. In a series of studies, researchers examined the role that demeanor plays in believability. They found that for some people, the effect is very powerful. Some people seem very dishonest even when telling the truth. More relevant to the topic of big liars is that some people naturally seem very trustworthy, even when they are telling a bald-faced lie. Big liars, people capable of walking into any situation, telling some whoppers, and having everyone believe them, have a certain demeanor that is identifiable. An analysis distilled those facets of demeanor down to what is called the believability quotient, or BQ. The BQ consists of 11 attributes honest-seeming people seem to possess. As it turns out, if someone seems honest on one of the demeanors, they usually seem honest on the other 10. So, here they are. 1. Believable people present themselves as confident and composed. 2. They are friendly and pleasant. 3. They have an engaged and involved interaction style. 4. They have plausible stories. 5. They maintain eye contact. 6. They are eager and immediate in their responses. 7. They don't fidget. 8. They act calm. 9. They have a consistent demeanor. 10. They convey certainty with their words. 11. They convey certainty in their tone of voice. T.R. Levine found that he could train students to control each of these elements. He brought a number of paid volunteers into his lab and spent time meticulously training them to become proficient at managing the 11 demeanors of the BQ. Next, he asked them to lie and to tell the truth, while others attempted to discern who was being honest and who was lying. One surprising finding was that observers were unable to tell who was lying and who was telling the truth. However, the students who had become more proficient at the BQ attributes were significantly more likely to be viewed as honest, even when they were lying. So it seems that a person's demeanor may be more important than their actual honesty in determining whether or not they will be believed. Taking this back to the topic of big liars, it seems that big liars who consistently avoid detection have likely mastered the BQ. They have cultivated the tricks and techniques that cause the rest of the world to trust them and believe them, even when they are deceptive. In other words, many big liars cannot be detected simply by looking for obvious signs of deceit, although, as we discuss in chapters 9 and 10, we can use some strategies to discover even the smoothest liars. Breaking the rules of conversation. Paul Grice was a British philosopher who taught at the University of California, Berkeley, during the 1970s. He proposed that when people talk to each other, they are involved in a mutually agreed-upon sharing of ideas. He referred to this idea as the cooperative principle. To effectively hold a conversation, Grice argued, each person must utter words that implicate a particular meaning. For instance, if I want to communicate to you that I want to eat, I may say, "I want to eat." Those words effectively implicate a meaning in your mind. When people lie, they violate the cooperative principle of communication. Grice identified 4 maxims that he saw as important to cooperative communication, and each can be flaunted to mislead conversational partners. Quantity. This maxim specifies that when communicating honestly, people must provide enough information to share the idea entirely without offering more than is required. Quality. This maxim, critically, is about telling the truth. People must say that which is truthful and must avoid saying that which is not. Relation. This maxim is the requirement to be relevant. People should not say things that are irrelevant to the discussion. Manner. This maxim is about the importance of clarity. When communicating, people should be to the point and avoid ambiguity or obscurity. When people adhere to Grice's maxims, conversations tend to be honest and proceed well. When speakers violate or flaunt the maxims, communication no longer serves a cooperative function. Lies violate Grice's maxims in several different ways. First, the mere intent to deceive with language violates the overarching cooperative principle. When one person is lying, collaboration between the conversational participants does not exist. The communication is, instead, a form of linguistic antagonism. Liars also sometimes violate the maxim of quantity. When a bleary-eyed driver is asked by a police officer if he's had anything to drink tonight, he might truthfully say, "A couple of beers," but omit any reference to the 6 shots of liquor that accompanied those beers. Deceivers sometimes flout the maxim of relation, too. When asked if he knows why the cash register is missing $100, a thieving employee might mention the dishonest habits of several other employees rather than speaking to the relevant issue of personal knowledge with a yes or no response. President Bill Clinton infamously violated the maxim of manner when discussing his relationship with an intern, Monica Lewinsky. When asked whether they had an inappropriate relationship, Clinton responded, "There is nothing going on between us," and "there is no improper relationship." When it later came to light that Clinton and Lewinsky had been involved in a sexual relationship, one that he had apparently lied about, Clinton argued that when saying, "There is nothing going on," and "there is no improper relationship," he meant that there was at that exact moment in time no such relationship, although there may have been hours earlier. This intentionally ambiguous use of language is the epitome of a violation of the maxim of manner. The most obvious way that liars breach conversational cooperation is through violation of the maxim of quality. When we call someone a liar, it is generally because they have intentionally and knowingly said something that they believed to be factually untrue. Whether the lie is an exaggeration, an omission, a bald-faced lie, or the intentional use of equivocal language, all lies violate the expectation that we have been told the truth. When we converse with others, we expect honesty. Otherwise, what is the point in talking at all? When we discuss lying, we define it, in part, by intent. People can violate Grice's maxims simply by being poor communicators, by being ill-informed, or by having their train of thought derailed. However, when people intentionally use communication to mislead, that communication is a lie. We define lying as a successful or unsuccessful deliberate manipulation of language without forewarning to create in another a belief that the communicator considers to be untrue. Liars lie by subtly, or not so subtly, manipulating conversational rules intentionally to cause us to believe something that is not true. Ways that big liars tell lies. There is no single way to tell a lie. Rather, people can bend and stretch statements and conversations in all manner of ways to confuse, befuddle, and ultimately mislead conversational partners. When one thinks of prototypical lies, one probably imagines outright lies. Outright lies, or fabrications, involve the total construction of false stories. They are entirely fictional accounts presented as the truth. A total fabrication is a dangerous gambit, as evidentiary cues can often prove their falsity. Other more subtle and more defensible techniques of lying are more common and easier to generate. Concealment, half-truths, and omissions involve simply failing to mention the truth. When asked what they did while their spouse was out of town for the evening, a person might mention that they watched television and made some dinner. And while this account is true, they left out the fact that a neighbor stopped by and they had sex for an hour. Concealments are easier to pull off than outright lies because they are passive. They require no fictional narratives, and they are unlikely to lead to intensive questioning. Concealments offer an additional benefit. If they are discovered, they are typically viewed as less dastardly than other forms of lying. While concealment may not meet the technical definition of lying, many people view it as deceptive falsification and respond to it as though they would to an outright lie. Big liars also make use of obfuscation and equivocation. That is, they use ambiguous, imprecise, or confusing language to hide the true meaning of what they are saying. For instance, if a person's boss were to ask what they have been doing today, the employee might respond, "Phew, I've been either on the phone or working on the computer every second since I walked in today," and might leave out that they were on the phone with friends and were on the computer booking a vacation. Feigned sarcasm is another way people lie. Sarcasm itself is a form of mutually acknowledged lying. If I sarcastically say, "Oh, you know how much I love paying large credit card bills," I am not being truthful, and my sarcastic tone intentionally tells you that I am not being truthful. However, people can use feigned sarcasm to tell the truth while communicating with a tone suggesting that they are lying. For example, if I stole my neighbor's lawnmower and he asked if I had seen the lawnmower, I could sarcastically say, "Yeah, Gary, I stole your lawnmower. Geez." Gary would then believe, because of my sarcastic tone, that I had not taken the lawnmower. Big liars also exaggerate. Exaggerations occur when the core of what someone says is the truth, but the degree to which it is true is false. People stretch the truth to make things seem bigger, better, or more meaningful than they really are. A coworker once said that the Vice President of the United States was a family friend who would likely do favors for his family. Other coworkers were surprised and fascinated, so they started asking many questions. Under the intense scrutiny, his claim that the Vice President was a family friend was eventually whittled down to the core truth. The coworker's father had once met the Vice President, exchanged a few pleasantries, and had his picture taken with him. It seems exceedingly unlikely that the Vice President ever considered the person a friend. Minimization occurs when people understate the degree of a truth. For instance, if an employee is accused of stealing money from the cash register, they might minimize by saying they might have taken $1 or $2. Heavy drinkers, when asked by their physicians how much they drink, tend to underreport their drinking by around 50%. When big liars are breaking the rules and denials seem unviable, the next best strategy is to minimize. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is another psychological technique that big liars can use to deceive people. A gaslighter uses mind manipulation strategies to convince others that they are losing touch with reality, that their memory is faulty, or that they are simply crazy. Gaslighters use false narratives to gain control over a situation or a person. For instance, one woman described the gaslighting techniques her husband used to control her. When the woman worked during the day, he accused her of neglecting the children, but if she worked in the evening, he accused her of neglecting their marriage. When he was accused of making passes at her friends, he convinced her that the friends had actually been the offending parties. He isolated her socially by convincing her that others were trying to undermine their marriage. He convinced her that she was naive and stupid, failing as both a wife and a mother. He hid items from her and then convinced her that she had lost them because of her ineptitude. Gaslighters use several dishonest techniques to fool their targets. First, they deny the truth. If someone were to accuse their partner of flirting with someone at a party, the offending person might simply say that they were not, often arguing that the accuser is paranoid or misremembering what actually happened. Gaslighters also withhold information. By living a life of secrecy, they can concoct alternative versions of reality that suit their needs. They offer information that contradicts their accuser's viewpoint. If I were stealing money from you, why would I have paid for your dinner last night? They discount evidence and information. Why would you believe what my brother tells you? He is an alcoholic. They cut down their victims to dismiss the accusations. You say I am untrustworthy, but you have never managed to stay in a relationship for longer than 6 months. They divert their victims from people who might reveal the truth, often by trying to isolate their victims from people who might confirm their suspicions about the gaslighter. They minimize the concerns of their victims or normalize the offense. Hey, this is not a big deal. Everyone has sex with their boss if they really want to get ahead. It's the nature of this industry. By using lies and manipulation, gaslighters develop a reality that is constantly shifting, leading their victims to doubt themselves and accept the liar's assertions. Gaslighters also use psychological manipulation and deception when they are accused of lying. When gaslighters and other big liars are accused of wrongdoing, they often flip the script on their accusers in a bit of psychological jujitsu. We use the acronym DARVO to explain that approach. This acronym enumerates the strategies that manipulators use to avoid blame and accountability. When accused, they first deny, rebuffing any accusation that they did anything wrong. Next, they attack anyone who claims they are lying. Finally, they reverse victim and offender. The liar claims that they are actually the victim. Big liars use the DARVO technique to turn the tables quickly, leaving their accusers wondering why they are now on the defensive. One might recall that during his presidency, Donald Trump successfully employed the DARVO approach with the press. When the press accurately accused President Trump of spreading false information about events, he first denied spreading incorrect information, then he attacked the press for making the accusations. Then he flipped the accusation and began to refer to mainstream news sources as fake news. Darvo, when successfully employed, undercuts accusations of dishonesty and brands the accusers as the dishonest ones. Lie, lie, lie. Repetition of falsehoods is another technique that big liars use to convince others. The illusion of truth effect is a well-studied psychological phenomenon in which false information that is heard again and again is believed to be more and more truthful despite its actual veracity. If people hear an untrue statement enough times, it becomes familiar. That feeling of familiarity, then, causes people to shift from critical analysis of the veracity of the statement to passive acceptance. Essentially, repetition shifts our brains to autopilot. Instead of thinking rationally, we take a shortcut and use our gut. After we've heard it 100 times, it just feels true, so we no longer analyze whether it actually is true. Politicians use the phenomenon to great effect. They continue to repeat dubious claims that crime is rampant or that a certain group hates America. After hearing those assertions enough times, many people accept them as true. After a while, we find ourselves thinking, sure, everyone knows that. Of course it's true. Even when researchers forewarn people that the repeated statements they are about to hear are no more likely to be true than statements that are not repeated, people still preferentially believe the repeated statements. This finding suggests that the power of repetition to alter our beliefs is so strong and so automatic that we may accept repeated lies despite our attempts to resist. Even before psychological scientists demonstrated the power of repeated lies in the lab, people had an awareness of repetition's powerful ability to distort beliefs. In Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler wrote that slogans ought to be repeated until every person in society comes to believe them. In recent times, politicians have repeated all sorts of lies, for instance, making claims that crime in the United States is at historically high rates, even though crime is actually at a record low. Nevertheless, large swaths of society come to believe that the lies are accurate. Big liars in politics, marketing, and beyond employ repetition strategies to remove suspicion. After enough repetitions, people don't even consider whether the lies are accurate or not. A related lying technique is the fire hose of falsehood. Some people have a remarkable ability to spew forth a tremendous amount of information, stories, and facts. People on the receiving end of that stream of communication don't have the mental resources to assess every claim as they are flying like water from a fire hose. Big liars can take advantage of those cognitive limitations. Knowing that many people will not have available cognitive resources to process all the information, they throw lies into the overwhelming onslaught of information. Because people have a rather limited ability to assess mountains of information on the fly, we wind up believing many claims as they are presented to us. Both Trump and Vladimir Putin employed the fire hose of falsehood with great effect in their various disinformation schemes. In both cases, by the time the press stopped to critically examine one specious claim, Trump and Putin would have already hurled several more falsehoods, leaving no time to address each one. As a consequence, some lies were never properly addressed as such. The big lie. Politicians have also attempted to fool people by using a strategy referred to as the big lie. The aim is to tell a lie so big that no one would suspect that anyone would be so bold as to make up such a fib. The big lie must be colossally large. The phrase that captures the essence of the big lie is, if you are going to tell one, make it a whopper. In Mein Kampf, Hitler elaborated on the big lie technique. He noted, the magnitude of a lie always contains a certain factor of credibility, since the great masses of the people in the very bottom of their hearts tend to be corrupted rather than consciously and purposely evil, and that, therefore, in view of the primitive simplicity of their minds, they more easily fall victim to a big lie than to a little one, since they themselves lie in little things, but would be ashamed of lies that were too big. Such a falsehood will never enter their heads, and they will not be able to believe in the possibility of such monstrous effrontery and infamous misrepresentation in others. In this passage, Hitler described big lies told by other groups, but he used the big lie strategy himself to convince the masses that Germany had not lost World War I, and that the Jewish people were conspiring to destroy the innocent German state. The OSS, the forerunner to the CIA, in their analysis of Hitler wrote, "His primary rules were, never allow the public to cool off, never admit a fault or wrong, never concede that there may be some good in your enemy, never leave room for alternatives, never accept blame. Concentrate on one enemy at a time and blame him for everything that goes wrong. People will believe a big lie sooner than a little one, and if you repeat it frequently enough, people will sooner or later believe it." Hitler had mastered the big lie to great effect. The OSS's analysis from 1944 seemed prescient of events 76 years later in the wake of the 2020 presidential election. Following his loss in the 2020 election, Trump seemed to draw from the big lie playbook, asserting that a conspiracy of bad actors had stolen the election that he had rightfully won. Despite widespread assertions from nonpartisan and even Republican officeholders that Joe Biden had fairly won the election, and even though the U.S. Supreme Court, including justices that President Trump had nominated, upheld the results of the election, Trump claimed that a widespread conspiracy of anti-American traitors had collaborated to undermine the national election. The big lie of the 2020 election was immensely brazen and colossal in its scope. President Trump and his allies argued that voter fraud had been widespread, alleging that dead people's ballots had been counted, dogs had voted, ballots were trucked across state lines, voting machines had switched votes cast for Trump to votes for Biden, and many other wild claims that the election had been stolen. However, none of those claims were supported by evidence. Additionally, it seemed likely that Trump believed he had lost the elections. No matter. A year after the election, more than 2/3 of Republicans believed that the election was stolen from Trump. In that regard, the big lie strategy was extremely effective. Robert Hanssen. This chapter began with the account of Aldrich Ames's lies as a spy for the Soviets. At that time, Ames had done more damage to U.S. intelligence than anyone else in the country's history. However, 8 years after Ames's arrest, Robert Hanssen bested him. Hanssen worked as an FBI agent. In 1979, early in his career, he began to sell secrets to the Soviet Union, and after its collapse, he continued selling secrets to the Russian government. In exchange for well over $1 million, Hanssen sold America's most closely guarded espionage secrets and compromised numerous secret agents who were ultimately executed as a result of Hanssen's betrayal. The FBI placed him in charge of compiling a list of all Russian double agents. He subsequently turned over the list to Russia. Ironically, he was also tasked with identifying the mole who was giving away these key pieces of intelligence to the Russians. Yes, he was asked to find himself. Unlike Ames, who twice passed a polygraph exam, Hanssen never had to take a lie detector test, and if he had, he likely would have passed. In the 1980s, the CIA had numerous Cuban agents who were double agents working for the Cuban government. All had passed numerous polygraph exams. Hanssen was arrested in 2001 when a KGB agent paid by the FBI turned over incriminating evidence of Hanssen's activities. He is currently serving 15 consecutive life sentences in the federal Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado. He is locked in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day and has been in such conditions since 2002. Conclusion. What lessons about big liars can we learn from people like Robert Hansen? If numerous studies on liars can tell us anything, if accounts of successful double agents can shine a light on the matter, if the tactics of some of the world's most notorious big liars can provide a clue, it is this: big liars successfully lie by acting normal. This skill may be honed over years of extensive practice, but for many people, it comes quite naturally. When we lie, the lie is often fairly straightforward. We concoct believable lies without much effort. Concealing emotions such as fear and guilt is easy enough to do. We may not be award-winning actors, but we know enough to mimic our non-lying behavior. Almost all people, when called upon to do so, can look relaxed, look someone in the eyes, and confidently tell a whopper that will be believed. The current research makes clear that when big liars act relaxed, confident, self-assured, friendly, and engaged, they will probably be viewed as honest and trustworthy people. Big liars are so successful because they look honest, just like you and me. We have presented evidence that reveals the subtle tricks that big liars use to conceal the truth and distort reality. However, understanding how big liars deceive tells us nothing about why they deceive. What are the motivations that drive some people to depart from the truth so habitually? Chapter 7 is our attempt to answer that question. Chapter 7. Examining why liars lie. A lie would have no sense unless the truth were felt dangerous. Alfred Adler. In an open confession, and at the risk of a marred image, one of us is a fish murderer. Some years ago, my son received a pet fish as a birthday gift. As time passed, the tank became dirty, and the water needed to be changed. Instead of adding warm water to the tank, I inadvertently added water that was too cool. The unfortunate consequence was a gray, lifeless fish discovered in the morning. I discussed with my wife whether to hurry to the store and buy a new fish before our son would notice, or to be the bearer of bad news. In this situation, what would you have done? In volleying the decisions back and forth, the argument for parental deception centered on sparing our child any negative emotions, or even potential trauma. Any good parent should protect their child from negative emotions, right? If you have ever been in a situation like this one, you know how easy it becomes to justify the use of deception to protect another. The only problem with this argument is that it assumes one's ability to accurately predict how others will respond. In this case, I predicted that telling my child that his fish had died would result in chronic and intense sadness. Having studied parental deception, I decided to tell my son that his fish was dead, ask for forgiveness for the accidental death, discuss any emotions he felt, and make decisions about a fish burial and about getting another fish. He decided to give the fish a river burial and expressed excitement about getting another pet. The fears that had tempted me to lie were unfounded. Decisions and motivations to lie are based on speculative calculations. People tend to lie when the truth does not work. However, we are not very accurate when making predictions about the future. In other words, it may be difficult for people to know when the truth won't work, so people may opt to lie because they have an incorrect assumption that a lie would work better. In the case of the dead fish, I could have lied and quickly secured another fish, believing that I would be shielding my child from intense negative emotions, but my prediction would have been incorrect. Thus, we suggest a modification to the argument that people lie when the truth poses an obstacle to goal attainment, in that people may lie when they think that the truth will not work. The motivation to lie is often based on flawed assumptions that the truth would not work or that a lie might work faster or better. So, what drives big liars to lie? In this chapter, we examine and unpack the reasons and motivations for lying. We ultimately hope to shed light on why big liars choose to abandon faithfulness to the truth and to honesty. In Chapter 1, we discussed the tripartite theory of lying and dishonesty. Its first proposition is that people lie when they perceive the utility of lying. That is, when they interpret or look upon a situation and become convinced that lying will be helpful, they tend to lie. Let's examine another situation in which calculations and interpretations of future consequences may lead to the path of deception or to the path of honesty. Being spontaneous and wanting to try out something new, you decide to relinquish all freedom to your hairstylist. When you see your new haircut, you are a little surprised and caught off guard by the bold new cut. You might be very unsure about whether it is flattering or not. You meet a friend for lunch and seek their opinion. Would you want your friend to lie to you in an attempt to spare your feelings, or would you want your friend to deliver an honest assessment, even if it meant receiving bad news? Most people would likely ask their friends to deliver the brutal truth rather than a lie aimed at sparing their feelings. We trust our friends to make accurate assessments, and we also trust that they will be honest with us. We often seek the truth from others we can trust because we realize that our own perspectives may be biased or skewed in one direction or another. Now, with the shoe on the other foot, imagine your best friend just arrived with one of the worst haircuts you have seen in a long while. You do everything to conceal your shock, disgust, and laughter as your friend asks you, "What do you think? Do you like it?" You may, almost instantaneously, blurt out, "It looks good. I like it. It brings out a new you." Why do we justify our lies as acceptable but desire complete honesty from others? Examining the perspectives of the liar and the dupe helps us to understand why people lie, and to understand how big liars may tell big lies and justify doing so. Reasons for lying. In 2006, Floyd Landis won the Tour de France. He was only able to bask in his victory for a short while, though. Because evidence of performance-enhancing drugs appeared in his urine tests, he was stripped of his title. For years, Landis denied using performance-enhancing drugs. He claimed that he was unfairly denied his victory. He continued to tell friends, fans, family, and the racing community that he was innocent, but in 2010, he finally came clean. He admitted that he had been lying all along. He was, in fact, a cheat. When asked why he lied so often and for so long, he claimed that he was protecting others who used performance-enhancing drugs, including Lance Armstrong. His motivation was that he didn't want to be a rat. Why do people lie? Recall that the tripartite theory of lying and dishonesty posits that people tend to lie when A. they see lying as useful, B. they think they can get away with lying, or at least think that detection would not be a big problem, and C. they can morally justify their lie. However, if we dig a little deeper, we can see that the specific reasons that people lie are plentiful. Identifying the specific motivational mechanisms of deception has been a challenge due, in part, to the complexities of various individual, relational, and situational factors. Another difficulty in identifying motivations for deception is that different researchers have proposed numerous categories of motivations, rather than using a single set of terms and organizing principles. As a result, scholars may conflate various aspects of lying behavior, fail to use the same terms across research, and/or use multiple terms for the same type of deception. Aldert Vridge, one of the most prolific deception researchers, stated that motivations for lying fell along three dimensions: A, the person who benefits from the lie; B, whether the lie is motivated by gain or loss avoidance; and C, whether the lie is motivated by materialistic or psychological reasons. While this model captures some dimensions of motivations to lie, we do not believe that it fully accounts for other aspects of lying. For example, some deception researchers classify lies on the basis of motivations, e.g. personal gain, but others also consider the type of lie, e.g. omission, or the consequence, e.g. harmful lies. Some also consider the intent of the lie. However, not all lies told with good intent lead to positive or beneficial outcomes for the targets of the deception. We prefer to understand these aspects of deception as different systems. We propose separate classifications for the primary beneficiary of the lie, motivations, types of lies, and consequences. Thus, the reasons that people may lie are numerous and may consist of various components. The vehicles by which people lie or deceive can take a variety of forms, largely through offering false information or withholding information. Employing deceit can also lead to several consequences, which result in the behavior being reinforced or being punished. Throughout these pathways, the deception can be focused on self, others, or a relationship. In this chapter, we consider these various dimensions as we review the motivations to lie, and in Chapter 8 we discuss them as we focus on the consequences of lying. As an example, a specific motivation, e.g. impression management, may prompt a specific type of lie, e.g. falsification, with the intended beneficiary being the self. The lie may lead to a consequence, e.g. praise, that in turn reinforces the specific motivation to lie again, e.g. via impression management. Assessing the motivations behind a lie can be challenging because the sender and the receiver of the lie may have different views about the reason for the lie. Additionally, attempting to isolate unique motivational factors for deceptive behavior poses a problem because motivations to deceive are not much different than underlying motivations for honest communication. We discuss each of these aspects further in this chapter. First, let's examine some of the research findings and proposed typologies of motivations to lie. R. E. Turner et al. Recruited 130 participants to record their lies and motivations for lying. They found that 5 motivations drove lying, listed here from the most common to the least common. 1. To save face, 55%. 2. To avoid tension or conflict, 22%. 3. To guide social interaction, 10%. 4. To affect interpersonal relationships, 10%. 5. To achieve interpersonal power, 3%. These findings suggest that most lying is not done for some instrumental gain, but to hide embarrassing information about one's self or to promote harmony in social interactions. Other researchers categorized motivations to lie by the intended beneficiary. Maybe you are motivated to lie primarily to get something you want, such as attention or praise. Alternatively, you may be motivated to lie with the intent to benefit others by making them feel good. Hampel organized lies based on beneficiary and identified 3 primary categories. Some lies benefited the liar, some benefited other people, and some benefited the relationship as a whole. The researchers classified all remaining lies into a 4th, miscellaneous beneficiary category. Similarly, another study categorized the reasons for lying based on the focus: A. Partner-focused, B. Teller-focused, C. Relationship-focused, and D. Issue-focused. In that study, the most common motivation was to avoid hurting a relational partner. The researchers also identified 15 specific motives across these 4 major categories. However, looking only at the intended beneficiary of a lie does not completely capture all motivating factors. Most studies ask the liars why they lied. Because people tend to justify their lies in a self-serving manner, the results are likely biased toward presenting the liars as having benevolent intention. Given these concerns, Camden and colleagues suggested a 2-dimensional system that included both the motivation for the lie and the intended beneficiary. More recently, when researchers looked at lying around the world, they found that the motivation seemed fairly consistent from one culture to the next. They asked people to recall a situation in which someone lied to them, and then the researchers coded the various types of lies, resulting in 10 pan-cultural deception moves. This list of pan-cultural motives seems to be the most comprehensive list of motivations we have reviewed. When examining the beneficiary of intent, we can see that the majority of lies are told to benefit the person telling the lie. Exhibit 7.1. Metz's 1989 Coding Categories. Reasons for lying. 2. Partner-focused reasons. Indication that partner's behaviors or attitudes, as perceived by teller, somehow motivated the deception. 1. To avoid hurting partner. Example, I knew he would be terribly hurt if I told him. 2. Concern for partner due to a current physical or mental state. Example, I felt she couldn't take the truth at that time because she was so tired and under so much stress. 3. Desire to maintain partner's face, image, or self-esteem. Example, she really does want to please me, and to tell her she doesn't would make her think less of herself. 4. Desire to protect partner's relationship with a third party. Example, I was kind of intimate with her good friend, and I knew that if she found out, she would have ended her relationship with her friend. 5. Uncertainty about partner's attitudes and feelings, often toward teller. Example, I didn't know how he felt about me, and I didn't want to scare him away. I didn't know how he would take it, maybe as a joke, but I wasn't sure. 6. Teller has been exempted by partner, either through direct comments such as, never tell me if you do X, or because partner has already been caught in a similar deception. Example, I was justified because he lied to me about the same thing. 7. To regulate or constrain partner's self-image when it is more positive than teller believes it should be. Example, he thinks he's such a great quarterback, so I told him he really wasn't. 3. Teller-focused reasons. Indications that deception is motivated by teller's concern for him or herself, generally to protect his or her image vis-a-vis partner or to protect some resource. 8. To protect or enhance partner's presumed image of teller, or to avoid violating partner's presumed role expectation for teller. Example, she thinks I'm the kind of girl who would never do something like that. 9. To protect teller's resources or ensure continuation of rewards or services from partner. Example, I knew if I told him I did have money, I would never get it back. Or, his car was much nicer than mine, and I was afraid he wouldn't let me use it anymore if he knew who was responsible for the dent. 10. Fear of being resented or abused by partner. Example, I knew from past experience that if he found out, he would make life miserable for me and the children. 11. Teller is too confused about the truth to know how to express it. Example, I didn't know how I felt, so I could ask him to understand. 4. Relationship-focused reasons. Indications that deception was motivated by attempts to maintain harmony and stability in the relationship. 12. To avoid conflict and unpleasant scenes. Example, I was afraid it would start a fight. 13. To avoid relational trauma and potential disengagement. Example, I think she would have just broken up with me. 5. Issue-focused reasons. Indications that deception was motivated by the privateness or triviality of the information, rather than by expressed concern for the effect of that information on partner or relationship. 14. The issue is too trivial. Example, I never told her about my fling because it wasn't really an affair, only a one-night stand. 15. The issue is too private. Example, it was my mistake and not really any of her business. Is lying selfish? The motivations of big liars, such as romance scammers, con artists, and financial fraudsters, are selfish, plain as day. Most of our research shows that big liars typically lie for their own benefit, and this finding has consistently been supported by other deception researchers. If you contemplate the lies you have told, you will likely see that many of them have benefited you in some way. Even with well-intentioned white lies, such as telling someone that you like their new outfit to protect them from feeling sad or angry, you may see that at least part of your motivation is to avoid social awkwardness, tension, or your own discomfort. Some moral philosophers have argued that all lies are inherently selfish, in that they unilaterally remove another person's ability to face the world as it truly is. Even though many lies may be self-oriented, they tend to be fairly benign and are typically told for somewhat harmless reasons, such as saving face, rather than as tools for nefarious material gain. Big liars may also tell many of their lies for relatively benign reasons, such as gaining attention or impulsivity, rather than with the sole intent to bring destruction to the people in their lives. Table 7.1. 10 Pan-Cultural Deception Motives. Motive. Description. 1. Personal transgression. A lie to cover up a misdeed. Examples include lying to hide relational infidelity or making a false excuse about why one was late to work. 2. Economic advantage. A lie motivated by monetary gain. Examples include knowingly selling defective products, seeking loans under false pretenses, and con artist schemes. 3. Non-monetary personal advantage. A lie to seek some desirable outcome for the self, other than economic advantage. Examples include bogus excuses to get class notes for a missed class, or to get a coworker to do a disliked task. 4. Social polite. Lies told to conform to a social rule or avoid rudeness. An example is saying that a gift was liked when it was not liked. 5. Altruistic lies, other than social polite. A lie told to protect another person or for another person's advantage. An example is a father hiding a health problem from his child to avoid upsetting the child. 6. Self-impression management. Lies motivated by the desire to appear more favorable to others. An example is exaggerating accomplishments to impress a romantic interest. 7. Malicious. Lies to cause harm to others. Common examples include spreading false rumors about another person to harm their reputation or to sabotage a relationship. 8. Humor, joke. Deception to be funny or prank another. 9. Pathological lies. Lies without apparent motive or purpose, lies out of obvious delusion, or lying with blatant disregard for reality and detection consequences. 10. Avoidance. Lies told to avoid another person. A typical example is fabricating an excuse to avoid attending an event with a friend. Pro-social lies, lying to benefit others. In an anonymous online forum, a person asked, "Should I tell my friend his wife is cheating on him?" The response they received was, "No, telling your friend could devastate him. What's the point of destroying his self-esteem by delivering such bad news? Is the higher moral ground here brutal honesty or compassion? Think about it." If a friend is asking questions and the answers might be painful, some people see a moral imperative to lie. Most of us have probably found ourselves in a situation in which someone did something nice for us, such as buy us a gift or prepare us some food, but the offering was a bit of a flop. When asked, "Do you like it?" you may have found yourself in a difficult position. Do you offer the truth, even though it may hurt that person's feelings, or do you tell a benevolent lie and say that you liked the offering? People may experience strong social pressures to respond in supportive ways, even if it means lying. The urge to lie to others when receiving an unwanted gift comes from a motivation to be polite or show gratitude. Parents, while not necessarily trying to promote lying, coax their kids to find nice things to say in such situations, even if the kind sentiments are untrue. Whether a lie is harmful or beneficial is determined by the consequence of the lie rather than the person's intent. Additionally, the intent and the consequence of a lie are not always congruent. Motivations to lie are separate from their consequences. Telling a lie with the intent to benefit someone may unintentionally result in negative outcomes for the person. For example, imagine kindly telling someone that they can surely accomplish their goal of being a professional singer, even though you truly believe that they are entirely devoid of talent. While benevolently intended, that lie could cause a great deal of unintended harm to that person. For instance, they might toil away for years because of your supportive lie, though their goal would remain hopelessly out of reach. If you were honest, they might decide to seek additional training based on your honest feedback as they continue to pursue their goal. Recall that many lies are self-oriented. Interestingly, people tend to believe that they tell fewer self-oriented lies than other people do, and they view their own lies as more beneficial to others. When people lie for others, the lie is usually seen as a means to benefit or protect other people rather than an intent to cause harm. For example, telling someone you like their new haircut when you do not is aimed at benefiting the other person or protecting them from feeling a negative emotion. In fact, the intent to protect your significant other's feelings is one of the most common reasons for using deception in romantic relationships. This type of lie has been referred to as a pro-social lie, an altruistic lie, a white lie, and benevolent deception because the liar's intention is to benefit another person. Of all types of lies and deception, white lies tend to be viewed as the most acceptable to tell in parental relationships, intimate relationships, and psychotherapeutic relationships. Kids as young as 3 years old tell pro-social lies, and they usually tell them with the intent to be polite. In one study, researchers examined white lies by asking children to take a picture of one of the researchers. In some cases, the researcher had an obvious mark of lipstick on their nose. The researcher made eye contact with the child and asked, "Before you take a picture of me, do I look okay for the picture?" Subsequently, as the picture was being developed, another researcher, unknown to the child, asked the child, "Did she look okay?" in reference to the person who was in the picture. A majority of the children told the researcher with the mark on their nose that they looked okay, but later told the other researcher that the person did not look okay. In a similar study, children were given a bar of soap as an undesirable gift and were asked if they liked it. Many children said they liked the gift, even though they seemed to not like the gift when they opened it. The expectation to be excited by a gift is strong and likely reinforces people to tell pro-social lies. From an early age, people begin to tell lies to others to be polite or to protect them from negative emotions, such as sadness, worry, or embarrassment. For big liars, does telling white lies continue to develop and grow throughout their lives? People continue to tell white lies throughout their lives. For example, people may tell restaurant servers that their dining experience was good when it was not. Surprisingly, most servers, 95%, indicated that they know when they were being told white lies and allow it because they believe it leads to larger tips. People also tell white lies within romantic relationships, believing that it will be helpful. Additionally, as we noted in Chapter 5, people tend to tell benevolent lies to their partners in the context of their sex lives. White lies are the most frequently used lies within psychotherapy, told by clients with the intent to protect the therapist. Patients may lie and say their therapist is really effective or that they are enjoying psychotherapy to avoid embarrassing the therapist. Similarly, in one study, most of the psychotherapists surveyed, 96%, indicated that they were sometimes deceptive to patients if they believed that it would protect them. Thus, telling white lies from an early age and throughout life appears to be the most frequent use of deception for people across situational and relational contexts, and it appears to be seen as the most acceptable form of deception to use. In our research, we found a strong correlation between telling benevolent lies and telling selfish lies. If someone tends to tell one type of lie, they tend to tell other types of lies as well. For big liars, the lines between white lies and other lies may become blurred, and all lies may have self-serving justifications, it is probably less likely that a big liar who tells a big lie is intending to benefit others. However, to ease any guilt from telling such a big liar might very well justify it as helping others, saving a business, or protecting a country. Antisocial lies, lying to harm others. One of the most infamous big liars, the serial killer Ted Bundy, denied raping, physically assaulting, and killing girls and women for more than a decade. Bundy referred to himself as the most cold-hearted son of a bitch you'll ever meet. Bundy's lies allowed him to escape detection and to continue harming others for years. He relied on antisocial lies, told to harm others and or protect the self. Not all antisocial lies are criminal in nature. For example, antisocial lies may include deceptively blaming a sibling for a smashed window or a broken vase with the intent to divert attention or for revenge. Although many lies are self-oriented, they are rarely told as an attack against others. However, some people lie with the intent to cause harm to others. When we assessed hundreds of people, we found a small subset of people who reported telling lies to punish others, exact revenge, take people down, and attack people. We call these vindictive lies. Others have called them malicious lies. Fortunately, those types of lies are rare, likely due to the strong moral prohibitions against lying and harming others. From an early age, we tend to hold negative evaluations of antisocial lies. Big liars who use vindictive or malicious lies may do so without regard to moral prohibition, or perhaps their desired outcome is valued more than any concerns about the immorality of lying. The intent of prosocial lies can be discrepant from the consequence of the lie, and the same is true for antisocial lies. Usually, the serious, harmful, and consequential lies are not told with a nefarious intent toward others, but rather are told in conjunction with a relational transgression. In fact, children as early as age 3 will lie to conceal a transgression. An adult in an intimate relationship may be concealing how much money they are spending on a gambling addiction. The romantic partner who discovers that their significant other not only has drained their bank account, but also has withheld this information, may become devastated by the discovery. In fact, lies told to hide a relational transgression tend to be the most difficult to forgive and from which to recover trust. The person who lied to conceal a gambling addiction was not necessarily trying to harm their significant other, and was likely justifying the behavior to think it was protecting them from harm. However, these lies can be big lies or grow into many lies. A cross-cultural study of 5 countries showed that malicious lies were not very prevalent, making up only about 4% of all lies. Malicious lies made up less than 1% of the lies in the United States, at the low end of the range, and about 17% of the lies in Pakistan, the high end. Malicious lies included spreading false rumors about another person to harm their reputation or to sabotage a relationship. While less common than other lies, antisocial lies seem much more likely to cause harm to others. You might be able to imagine various scenarios in which someone spread lies to unfairly misrepresent another person, leading to embarrassment or shame. For example, people sometimes disparage others by spreading false rumors about them. In the context of romantic jealousy, people will sometimes derogate apparent competitors to seem more attractive by comparison. Some highly consequential lies could be false accusations of sexual abuse motivated by revenge or defamation of character by slander and libel. Lies like these are often motivated by a desire to damage the reputation of another person or to take revenge against someone. An example of lies that were motivated by revenge can be seen in the case of a 25-year-old woman who moved to London to begin a career in video advertising and developed a romantic relationship with a coworker. After the relationship ended, the woman began to harass her ex-boyfriend through 20 different Instagram accounts. She stalked him, She sent emails to his clients and colleagues, falsely claiming that he had sexually abused her. She concocted a story that while with her ex-boyfriend, she had become pregnant and had a failed abortion that led to a miscarriage. And then she fabricated a story about being kidnapped and raped by an MI5 agent. She subsequently told police that she and her ex-boyfriend were being stalked. When she was finally arrested, a search of her computer, phone, and tablet revealed that she had sent numerous fake emails, had been stalking him, inquired about purchasing a silicone baby bump, and was trying to find out whether police can track where emails are sent. She was found guilty of 2 counts of stalking, 2 counts of sending malicious communications, and 1 count of perverting the course of justice. People who lie without remorse or regard for others may have an antisocial personality disorder or psychopathy, as we discussed in Chapter 3. They may lie in entirely manipulative ways and with a callous disregard for others. They even sometimes tell their antisocial lies because they derive some form of pleasure, entertainment, or thrill from causing harm to others. Personality traits as sources of motivation. Do big liars struggle with their self-concept? It depends. Recall that pathological liars experience remorse and distress from telling lies, likely because lying is discrepant from how they want to view themselves. However, for some other big liars, there is no discrepancy between telling lies and how they view themselves. In fact, they see their lies as entirely justified. Recall that the tripartite theory of lying and dishonesty suggests that people lie only when they can morally justify their dishonesty. Many big liars believe that it is okay to lie. Some generally don't see anything wrong with lying. Others see their lying as acceptable because they don't think others deserve the truth, or they see their lying as benign or even helpful. Big liars can convince themselves that, despite their dishonesty, they are good people. Truth default theory. The deception scientist Tim Levine suggested, people lie for a reason, but the motives behind truthful and deceptive communication are the same. While the truth is consistent with the person's goals, he or she will almost always communicate honesty. Deception becomes probable when the truth makes honest communication difficult or inefficient. Deception is purposive. Most people lie for a reason, usually to achieve a goal. In other words, most people do not lie for lying's sake, but do so to achieve some other goal. Levine submitted the following. 1. People lie for a reason. That is, deception is purposive. It is therefore not random. 2. Deception is usually not the ultimate goal, but instead is a means to some other end or ends. That is, deception is typically tactical. 3. The motives behind truthful and deceptive communication are the same. 4. When the truth is consistent with a person's goals, the person will almost always communicate honesty. 5. Deception becomes probable when the truth makes honest communication difficult or inefficient. Big liars are people who frequently find that telling the truth is problematic for achieving a desired goal. Remember that the theory of big liars is that they see lying as useful and the consequences as tolerable. In her book on lying, Bach stated that the difference between lying and truth-telling is that lying requires a reason, while truth-telling does not. We do not tend to inquire why someone has told us the truth, as most people expect truth from others as part of an implicit social agreement that we make. Lying violates this unspoken contract and often leads to negative consequences, relationally or otherwise. Unless there is some reason to do otherwise, people speak honestly. This inclination toward truthfulness is the veracity principle. According to the veracity principle, we should expect to see much more honesty than dishonesty because, by and large, people have no reason to be dishonest. Most people adhere to the principle of veracity because usually the truth works just fine. Why do big liars lie? One might wonder why big liars blatantly disregard the social contract of honesty. As it turns out, big liars lie for the same reasons that we all lie. Principally, big liars lie to accomplish goals. They tell lies that are purposive and are used to accomplish a variety of objectives, e.g., impressions, lying for gain, to avoid loss, and they do so when they believe the truth won't work and when the consequences of lying are tolerable. Additionally, big liars may use lies when the truth would work just fine, but they perceive a lie might work even better. Through experience, big liars may learn that telling lies works for them. They find that dishonesty consistently helps them get what they want. Big liars, like most people, primarily tell self-oriented lies. When we asked people to recall the person they have interacted with who lied more than anyone else, i.e., the big liars, 100% of our participants indicated that the person had primarily told self-serving lies. Other researchers have found a similar pattern. Some people, such as pathological liars, seem to tell lies without a direct goal in mind and appear to lie even when the truth may be consistent with their goals. Our research on pathological lying suggests that pathological liars are sometimes unaware of their reasons for lying. They indicate that telling lies is out of their control or is something they seem to do compulsively or habitually. However, just because someone cannot articulate their motivation does not mean that their motivations do not exist. Behavior tends not to be random. People usually engage in complex behavior for a reason. Psychologists have long recognized that people are often unaware of the complex cognitive processes that give rise to their behavior. They are often unaware of things that prompt their behaviors, and they are also sometimes unaware that they have engaged in a behavior. When people are befuddled by their own lies, their powers of introspection may simply not allow them to notice or acknowledge their motivations. We contend that their motivation to lie exists nonetheless. Conclusion. We turn back to the tripartite theory of lying and dishonesty as an overarching model of lying and its motivations. The tripartite theory accounts for circumstances in which we might expect people to lie and also predicts who is likely to be a big liar. Remember, big liars are simply people who meet the three criteria regularly. Recall the first principle is that people lie when they perceive the utility of lying. That is, to them, lying seems to offer some advantage over the truth. People may lie not only when the truth does not work, but also when people think that the truth would not work. Big liars simply think that lies work better than the truth more often than the rest of us. The second principle is that people lie when they perceive the probability and consequences of being detected as acceptable. It is plausible that big liars and pathological liars do not think about the consequences when telling lies. For big liars, being deceptive may seem no riskier than being honest. Another possibility is that they fail to fully consider the long-term consequences of their dishonesty. Our recent research involves interviewing and conducting psychological assessments of pathological liars. We have found that they do not think of the future consequences when they are telling lies. The third principle is that people lie when they can morally justify their dishonesty. Guilt, shame, and regret keep most people's lies to a minimum. We have found that these negative emotions may not stop pathological liars at the moment they are lying, but they often feel guilt and remorse sometime afterward. Big liars may lie prolifically because their moral sense is not a powerful enough brake. In sum, big liars lie for the same reasons we all lie. They simply see more opportunities and fail to see as many deterrents. The consequences are an important reason why most people are honest, but some people lie prolifically. In Chapter 8, we discuss the consequences of big liars' dishonesty for themselves, the people they lie to, and society.